What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Gentlemen of the Corax. Today we have a really cool tier list episode where we're going to be ranking the Cretaceous age animals from the Western Interior Seaway. So before we get into the list, Jared, you want to talk to us about what the Western Interior Seaway was?
Yeah, no problem. So during the late Cretaceous period, North America was not a single uniform continent. And the reason why is because you had the Gulf of Mexico. So that's, in modern days, like the shores of Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi. And then way in the north, where the Arctic Ocean is, those two water bodies connected. So the Gulf of Mexico flooded inwards, connecting with the Hudson Seaway at the top. And ultimately, what that did is it flooded what is now the Great Plains and split the North American continent into two separate continents. So in the west, the Western continent that had like California, Nevada, the Dakotas, that was called Laramidia. And the Eastern continent was called Appalachia. And so where we are in the Great Plains, at least I'm here in Texas, we weren't necessarily part of either of those. We were directly underwater. And so this seaway existed it connected about 100 million years ago. And
Yeah,
there's some
it did
debate.
extend back into the earlier Cretaceous,
Yeah, yes. So
right?
you had,
It first connects, but its maximum is at 85 to 70, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you had flooding in the south and the north that were like the early Western Interior Seaway before those
Right.
two were connected, and the connection happened somewhere in the Albion. But even in the Aptian parts of the Cretaceous, parts of Texas were underwater and parts of Canada were underwater. They just weren't fully smushed together yet. So, um, anyway, you had this shallow body that bisected North America, and it was largely pretty shallow. It's also thought it had a somewhat lower salinity, so there was not as much salt in this water body, and that just made for a really interesting mix of fauna. Some people have called it Hell's Aquarium. It has tons of predators in it, more than we would guess could exist in an ecosystem like this. Like, how on earth, where there's so many predators, there must have been so much food to support them. And other Cretaceous oceans at the time were similarly diverse, but the Western Interior Seaway is well studied. There's endemism, and we know a lot about what existed in it because, fortunately for us, it was in North America.
Awesome. Yeah. So there's in this list, I try to have a good mix of some like really iconic animals that like everybody knows, even I guess like the laymen that aren't super into paleo, they might still recognize these. And then some other ones that are, I guess, a little bit less known or things that don't really receive much press. And our rules for this, kind of like the last ones that we've did, we have this time we have six tiers, and we're limited to five animals per tier. So we have a total of 30 animals on here.
Okay, ground rules. Only one shark can go in S tier.
That is up for us to
No,
decide.
absolutely not. Nope.
There's at
Sorry,
least a
guys.
couple I could see in the S on this one.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this will go. I'm a marine reptile guy, but I'm not gonna lie, I love sharks.
Um,
All right, so our first animal on the list is Archelon. How do you say that? Ischiros?
Is
Say Kairos.
Yeah,
Ischiros, yeah.
Skyros, I'd say as well. I agree. Archelon is Skyros.
So what do we think on this one? First, does anyone want to say anything about its biology, morphology, things like that?
I don't know too much
Okay.
about. I know I said I'm a marine reptile guy, but I should probably preface it with I'm a marine reptile minus turtles guy. Um, I don't know too much about turtles, but they're pretty cool. Biggest turtles to ever live, Archelon as a whole. I don't know how many species are in that genus, but um, yeah, biggest turtles to ever live. They were like VW buggies. They were huge.
Hmm.
And there were some other big turtles that were contemporary with them. I will say, like Protostega. Protostega was also big, but it wasn't quite this big. And so these are well known from Campanian deposits, as far as I know. So you're getting them in places like the Pierre Shale.
And the Archelons are not particularly closely related to the Protostegids, right?
I don't know.
They're just
I
two giant turtle lineages running around at the same
No,
time.
they're in the same family as
Okay.
Protostegidae. Yeah, they're Protostegids.
Okay,
Um,
never mind.
which is a completely separate like lineage from any living sea turtle, even though for a while I think they thought they were related to leatherbacks because they did have a very leathery carapace, but
Right.
and they do have kind of very like they have beaks as well. But yeah, they're not related at all. And I do gotta say, I really think fondly of turtles because they're so mysterious. Like people like will fight to the death on the evolution of turtles. And they're just really unique. Like they're not in their shell, they are their shell. So I've just listened to many paleontologists argue about these guys, and so I have a love.
And it's cool
plus,
that everything evolves into turtles at some point.
That's
yeah,
crab.
turtle.
Well, if we look at like the Triassic, Cole, we talked about this a little bit on a
Oh
different
yeah, the
episode. There's a bunch
Placodots.
of there's a bunch of turtle-like animals that weren't actually turtles, but still had very similar morphologies.
Yeah.
Broad ribs and hardened exterior shells.
Yeah, but as
Like
far
they're
as like the
Soraptors are just
spinal
not
column being
whatever turtles
attached to
are.
the shell itself, that is just completely bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the fact that they can claim a title as the biggest of something, like any animal, not just Archelon, but just for future, if you can say you were the biggest of something, that kind of puts you up there. And so the biggest turtle of all time is a pretty cool title, I think. This should go in the top three tiers for sure.
Oh yeah, I
Agreed.
think A tier for this one.
Yeah, I
Well,
wouldn't say S, but A.
one of the things that I think at the Tucson show, I saw a articulated fossil of this last year, and it is something you don't really think of until you see how big these things actually were. Like they are ginormous.
Yeah, I've definitely heard of the Archelon moment before, where you're just in awe of the size,
Yeah.
because
They're like,
it's bigger than everybody thinks it's going to be.
yeah, I think the biggest specimen is like 15 feet from head to tail. Imagine that swimming
Actually,
by you. It'd be like a car just like blundering by you.
yeah, I would say A or B would be solid tiers on them.
Let's be generous and put it in A tier for now, and we can always move it if we need to, I think. I think A tier
Good.
is solid.
I think it's good.
I think that makes sense. So our next one is Acheolamna millarchi. And this is a really obscure elasmobranch. They're believed to be filter feeders. It's known by an articulated specimen from Mexico, and it's got a very broad head with these really elongated pectoral fins. And that has led researchers to believe that this was a filter feeding animal. So it kind of resembled a manta ray with those really elongated pectoral fins where it would just like glide in the water. But there hasn't been any teeth definitively found with the specimen. And I found it interesting that there wasn't any CT scans done on it, at least that's been published. So they don't actually know what the teeth are like or if there was teeth within the specimen. But they credit it to be, or they say that it could possibly have been Cretomanta, which we can find elsewhere, that may be the tooth taxa to this. But I mean, again, we don't really know for sure. So that's up for debate. They tentatively call these lamniforms, which I also am kind of skeptical at because there's no evidence of a dorsal fin. And that's a trait that is really unusual for at least the true sharks. You could find batoids without those, but for a true shark to not have a dorsal fin, that's pretty unusual, especially when all lamniforms that we know of alive today have two dorsal fins.
Hmm.
And it's even unique for like a hexanchoform, for example, which is a shark, and they only have one dorsal fin. So I found that pretty unusual with these.
Interesting. And that's I don't know anything about Aquila lamna. I know I've seen the specimen, not in person, but like, I looked at the paper.
Where's it
And
housed at?
one more time?
Well, where's it housed at in the specimen?
There's some controversy on that. So it was supposed to be housed somewhere, but so basically they bought the specimen, as far as I know. But in Mexico, it's illegal to purchase these fossils. So they bought a slab of limestone that happened to have the fossil in it that they prepped out. And they stated that it was going to be housed
Hmm.
in a certain museum, but they said that, and then that museum wound up not actually coming into fruition at the time that they said it was going to be housed at. So it wound up going to, I believe, somewhere else, some other museum in Mexico.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Oh, that's good.
So they had
Well,
to have like an erratum on it.
you know, I personally am a fan of any way to get past bureaucracy that is ethical. And to me, that sounds just fine. If that's what they had to do, then I don't think it should be controversial. Um, that was in the hands of some seller, and it could have gone God knows where until those researchers got their hands on it. And if they had to buy it, then so be it, you know? So I'm okay with that. But uh, yeah, no, these are really cool. And I like that there's only one specimen known of them and that they're super mysterious. And where they were found, there's this Turonian taxon. Where they're found in Mexico is Lagerstätte because there are other really, really, really gorgeous fossils that come from there. There's a polycotylid as well that was found in the same quarry, I believe.
And
And
also Tychotus, which we'll get to later.
yeah, yeah, Tychotus was also found there for that recent Tychotus paper. So it's a beautiful quarry, and I think it would be a dream to find something like this myself. It's not too far away, so I'm in Texas, and that's it's in Mexico, but close to Texas. It's northern Mexico where this was found. I think in Coahuila. I'm not sure. So it's pretty cool. I like these a lot. And they have a very unusual morphology. I don't know if the missing dorsal fin was just as a result of taphonomy or if it really just is not there. But if it is truly missing a dorsal fin, that gets weird points. I think it should be top three for sure. So I don't think S yet because there's not quite enough known about it, but it is weird, and I like weirdos. So weirdos in A tier is reasonable to me.
What do you
Yeah, I
guys?
I
like A tier.
agree. I
This thing's
think the
cool.
pectoral fins are so cool. The fact that they're like wider than the entire shark's like length of the body. I just think they're really neat.
Yeah, I could do an A tier on it. I don't. I mean, it's a wacky elasmobranch, but I have an affinity towards some other ones on this list.
Mhm.
So I think an A would be a fair tier on it.
Yeah, and B would be acceptable, like if there were more
Yeah, that's the
known,
lowest I go.
yeah, if there were more of them known and we knew a little bit more about them, A would be pretty solid. But like, I don't know, it's just hard to say much about them. They're just this weird, super long, thin pectoral fin, like little shark. How big are they?
I believe they're like around 6 feet wide with their pectoral fins, and they're a little bit shorter
That's
than that for their body length.
that's a lot bigger than I expected. I don't know why.
Yeah. And
Wow.
I mean it is pretty cool. It's a filter feeder that convergently evolved these manta-like pectoral fins. Yeah, and it's in the Cretaceous, so this is well before manta rays were a thing.
Yeah,
I think A is fine, and then we can drop it if we need to.
I agree. Let's do it.
So our next one is Baculides grandis.
All right. Baculides, useful as an index fossil, interesting shape, but I'm not gonna lie, when you are a fossil hunter, these are so common. They're all over the
They're a lot of people's gateway into fossil collecting.
That's
Think
true.
of it as think of it as like a commonality amongst like all fossil hunters that probably have gotten a lot of toddlers into fossil collecting later on.
True, 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 true. And they're weird. It's weird that that shell can
You know,
withstand forces of life in the Western Interior Seaway. That's like the most
yeah,
violent
heteromorph.
of all
Yeah,
time.
it's
So
yeah, they were oriented horizontally in life. They have a lot of structures within the shell that this side up that are also the same structures that we see in a lot of convergently, a lot of ordovician, like nautiloids. And they probably occupied the middle of the water column just based on isotopes from their apertures. So not the top, not the benthos.
Oh, didn't they also like travel in like big shoals? So imagine like a whole bunch of
I
these
buy that.
swimming there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that yeah, they do die in like mass death assemblages and not just kind of like scattered, but
Yeah.
they're
There are
big groups.
so many, I mean, like so many species of Baculites.
Mhm.
Um,
Right.
I don't know anything about Baculites grandis specifically, like specifically grandis, but Baculites as a whole, I mean, these things were prolific. They lived like, I think, I'm trying to think of late Cretaceous strata that doesn't have them. And I think they're really like in all of them. I don't know when they first appeared. Um, but in terms of the Western Interior Seaway, I won't be surprised if they existed the whole time. Um, these things are they're pretty cool, but I'm a little bit jaded to them because I've seen too many in my time. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I see like they're interesting, but as far as ammonites go, they're not even close to being the weirdest ones. So they do get kind of big too. I know there are some specimens that are um I don't know specific species, but I've seen some specimens myself in the field that are probably a couple feet long. So
And were they intact, or do you mostly just find like chunks of like segments?
you usually find chunks and segments, but there's some sections in like well, where I go fossil hunting is in Texas. So what we have where they're well preserved the most, where I see them most frequently, is the Austin Chalk Formation. And in sections
Mhm.
of the Austin Chalk where I usually see them, they are oftentimes well preserved. So that was mostly from the Coniacian to the early Campanian is when the Austin Chalk was deposited, and I've seen some decently large intact baculites coming out of there. But it's Steinkerns, it's the internal mold. Very few of them have their shell
Yeah.
anymore.
And to be clear, in case it wasn't mentioned, these guys are ammonites. And like ammonited proper, they're just this is heteromorphic and uncurled version of the classic ammonite.
Yeah.
And they break a lot along their suture patterns, which in these ammonitic ammonites are really, really complex.
Mm.
And so you get these like very these contacts between these suture patterns in the throughout each of the cameri that are really complex and really neat looking when they're broken up like that. They've occupied a pretty important place in some Native American folklore, sacred objects, stuff like that. So we
Interesting.
do have a record of that from
Stacked-
modern societies.
Yeah, with how stacked the Western Interior Seaway is, though, I would probably put these in like a D tier.
How
D.
about C tier?
I think C. Let's be generous for now. C is decent.
Yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
like that they're ammonites. They're not the weirdest ammonite, so that's why I'm not putting them very high. Like they're pretty standard for a heteromorph ammonite, in my opinion. But yeah, C is acceptable to me.
They remind me of those like party noisemakers that like someone took an ammonite and like blew into it and it just stretched out.
Yeah, yeah. For those listening, it's really just like a long, skinny pen-shaped tube with a little squid coming out of the open end. That's how you can imagine it. Like it's a not standard ammonite at all.
Hmm.
So we're thinking C on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or baculites.
Our next one's another filter feeder, Bonerichthyes gladius.
Bonerichthyes was a big fish, wasn't it? It was. I don't know much about these. I've never found any evidence of one myself in the field, but didn't these things get really large?
They
Yeah, up
were
to
named pretty
like
recently.
5 meters, I believe.
Wow,
Uh,
5 meters is
Yeah.
yeah,
crazy.
these are pretty new in terms of Western interior fauna. They're like by named by Chuck Bonner last 20 years,
They were named by Chuck Bonner.
or named for Chuck Bonner in the last 20 years.
To
Sorry.
say, surprised he
Yeah,
got
probably named after himself, but
so.
who's
For the
a really prolific fossil collector in Kansas.
yeah, for those listening, who like can't necessarily watch this, it's basically what you're looking at. You know, megamouth shark. It's that kind of mouth, but it's attached to a bony fish that has kind of a swordfish-like body. So you take a swordfish's body, you put a basking shark's face on it. There you go. There's Bonerichthyes, and yeah, 5 meters is crazy. So these got big.
Yeah.
And that is a pretty decent analogy because This is a bony fish that convergently evolved a similar feeding pattern to the megamouth and things like that that we see today within the shark world. So it's a pretty interesting evolutionary feat with Bonarichthyes.
And I'm not gonna lie, I think they're kind of rare, which is cool. For me, rare equals cool. I can't help it. So I like them. As far as the big fish in the Western Interior Seaway go, they aren't the most charismatic or interesting yet to me, but yeah, they're pretty cool. I can see them in B or C tier, which
Where are they placed phylogenetically? Are they
I don't.
Helios?
I assume they're teleosts, but
Okay.
anything more specific than that,
Yeah, so what are we thinking for the tier on it?
I'm gonna
B
put
tier is
It's a
good.
B or C.
Right, so D or C?
Oh, I'd say B or C.
Oh,
I'd say
B or C?
Yeah, I like B.
B?
I say C.
I would lean towards C too. I don't know, it doesn't do a ton for me, but we can always do B and then drop it.
If it says anything about this taxon, this is one of the animals that I've never gone on a deep dive on the internet. I've never read papers about it. I've never like it's never really stimulated me that much. So it's
Yeah.
like it's okay. It's never inspired me to read about it, so that's saying something in
It's
my mind.
like I don't know, it has some cool adaptations, but it's just a really big fish.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah.
Our next one is Cladastes propython.
Cladastes propython. Well, okay, we're finding my wheelhouse. So Cladastes propython, you have let's just think of mosasaurs in general, right? So if you take mosasaurs, the whole group, you split it into four sections. Those four sections are Platyplatycarpinae, Tylosaurinae, uh, Platyplatycarpinae, Tylosaurinae, Mosasaurinae, and Halosaurinae. So those are the four subfamilies within it. And depending on who you ask, there are two others, but I don't think they're real. So those are the four, if you ask me. And Cladastes is kind of the poster child, one of the poster childs for one of those subfamilies. So there's this one subfamily within Mosasauridae. It's called Mosasaurinae with an N, which I know sounds weird, but that's an important distinction. And Cladastes is one of the most famous mosasaurs within Mosasaurinae. Other mosasaurs within Mosasaurinae include Mosasaurus itself, Prognathodon, Globidins, those types of mosasaurs. And what makes Cladastes interesting is that it's fairly basal within Mosasaurinae. It has a couple of plesiomorphic, so primitive characters to it. And uh, Eatlo, actually, from the Skeleton Crew podcast, she actually published on a relative of Cladastes. It's called Jormungand,
Jorgi.
after the Norse god, and it kind of shows intermediate traits between Cladastes and Mosasaurus, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, but
So you kind of
mosasaurians occupy like a more prominent, like are more prominent and diverse towards the later part of the Western Interior's lifespan. And right,
yeah, I mean, I would say that diversity. Here's the thing: in the Western Interior, not necessarily, because in the Western Interior Seaway there aren't many good Maastrichtian deposits. But as a whole in the world, mosasaurs are thought to be more diverse at the end of the Maastrichtian, and I guess I agree. But the main reason that's said is because they're really good end Maastrichtian deposits to be found in places like Europe and Africa. Um, for earlier deposits from the Campanian and Santonian and stuff, there are some decent ones like in Kansas, but um, it's hard to say. Even in times of mosasaur evolution, there are thought to be not that many taxa, like in the Turonian. We're finding out that there are actually quite a few more taxa than we thought. There's a lot of undescribed diversity. So mosasaurs were kind of diverse off the bat, and um, yeah, I would say for now that's the consensus that yes, they're most diverse at the end Maastrichtian, but it won't surprise me if it's in future years if we find out that other times were as diverse if not more.
And this was one of the smallest right?
It was small. I wouldn't say it
It
was
was
one of the,
small.
but it was small. So Cladastes is like a 12-foot animal in
Mhm.
average, I'd say, variants. There's a really, really beautiful Cladastes that was found in Alabama that is not been written up before, but I'm not kidding. I saw this at the last Mosasaur meeting. That's a conference of Mosasaur researchers, and it was in the Netherlands this time. And I saw one of the speakers talk about it, and it's probably the most beautiful mosasaur specimen I've ever seen, like ever. I don't think there's a single mosasaur that really outdoes this Cladastes specimen from Alabama that for some reason no one has worked on yet. So they're really cool. They're classic. They were one of the first described mosasaurs from I think back in the Bone Wars. I won't be surprised if it was Cooper Marsh that did it. And yeah, they're interesting. They have some useful primitive characters, but as a whole, like ecology wise, they weren't that interesting. They were piscivores, so they were eating fish. They were kind of small, stayed out of the way of the bigger mosasaurs. They were all right for a mosasaur, in my opinion.
They went into fresh water occasionally, though, too, right? I think isotope analysis said at least, I don't know about all of them, but I think this species, they did isotope analysis that suggested they went into fresh water occasionally.
That one surprised me. I don't. If there was a paper on Cladastes specifically where they did that isotope analysis and decided it went to freshwater, I wouldn't be surprised.
Mhm.
Other animals, other mosasaurs have also been known to go into freshwater. So Pannoniosaurus, which
Mhm.
might be a chimera, might not be what it is that the scientists who described it are saying it is. But in either case, there was a mosasaur in freshwater deposits in Europe during the Santonian, and that's what they're calling Pannoniosaurus. And why am I forgetting this?
Isn't there
Pliopodic.
Prognathodon too?
I don't know about Prognathodon. Maybe. Pliopodicarpus is known from freshwater deposits. For Prognathodon, there was a speaker at this mosasaur meeting that I went to that was suggesting prognathodon was found in freshwater deposits, and I'm not going to name them because I don't think they're right. I think on the presentation that I saw, I have a suspicion it's probably a crocodile tooth because that's what they're justifying it as. They're justifying like, oh, prognathodon is in this freshwater deposit based on this tooth, and I personally think it's a croc tooth. But yeah, maybe I won't be surprised if mosasaurs went into freshwater deposits. So, or like I know they did, but I won't be surprised if more mosasaurs like Cladastes went into
Mhm.
fresh.
So for Cladastes, it's I feel like it's kind of an average mosasaur, so I would probably put it in like C tier.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do C or D. I don't, not to insult them, but
Yeah, I think
but we
C.
have a lot of cool marine reptiles on this list, I will
Yeah.
say.
Yeah,
I
as
think
a
we can
worker,
be prepared to kick them down.
Yeah.
Our next one is Cretalamna haddonii. So this is it's a medium-sized shark. It's a mackerel shark, and they have kind of your I guess quintessential mackerel shark tooth designs, where you have a principal cusp and you have two smaller lateral cusplets. And Cretalamna has largely been considered or at least Cretalamna appendiculata, which is what everybody calls basically every Cretalamna tooth that they find. It's basically Cretalamna appendiculata is a waste bucket taxa that's had all of these different Cretalamna species from basically since the Albian up through the Paleogene, just lumping it into that one species, which is a massive range. And there is some work done. This was published in Cyverson 2013, I believe. Cretalamna haddonii, and it's known from a partial skeleton with a lot of vertebrae, a lot of teeth that were mostly disarticulated from the Niobrara chalk of Kansas. So
Hmm.
this was, I believe, latest Santonian, early Campanian in age. But yeah, so in that publication, Syverson went through and basically did a revision on Cretalamna taxonomy from a lot of the Cretaceous ones because, like I said, um, people have just been lumping Cretalamna appendiculata into this really big bucket that really isn't warranted. So Cretalamna haddonii was one of those species. This was also published before, not under this species name, with Shimada, where he discussed the articulated specimen that they had with this. I believe it had the palatoquadrates and meccal cartilage as well on it. And his publication, he described intermediate teeth, which is a trait that we know of with modern day mackerel sharks, particularly like the salmon shark, for example, where they have a typical mackerel shark tooth design, but they also have these intermediate teeth, which is basically a reduced tooth in between the anterior and lateral positions. But this is a really unique trait within mackerel sharks. Other shark types don't really have this. But anyways, Syverson, he looked at the dentition and he didn't agree with the hypothesis of intermediate teeth within Cretalamna hadani, which means that you would have had a lineage, Cretalamna, which would have not had these reduced tooth designs within the intermediate positions. And you'd have all these modern lineages like Lamnidae, for example, that still have this plesiomorphic tooth design, which means that these were separated probably well into the Cretaceous, maybe even the early Cretaceous, with your otodontid lineage, which has Cretalamna, and then the modern, great white shark, salmon shark, mako shark, things like that. So that's why I believe that these are pretty distantly related to the modern mackerel sharks that we think of, like the great white.
Hmm. So, what do you think of the hypothesis that Cretalamna to Megalodon is this case of anagenesis? Like over the course of, I don't know, 70 million years, Cretalamna slowly turns into Megalodon. Would you call Cretalamna a direct ancestor to Megalodon then?
Reticulumna, yeah. I would argue that Ototus obliquus is a I don't know that it really warrants a genus designation difference based on tooth design. So like if you look at a Cretalamna tooth and then you look at Ototus obliquus or Ototus nidini, the unserrated Ototus lineage teeth, I don't think that there is enough tooth differences, any enough like substantial morphological differences to warrant a genus change. I think that the genus change really makes sense when we look at the other sharks within it. So like when you look at like Megalodon, for example, that is a vastly different tooth design than like Ototus obliquus or Cretalamna. And same thing when we look at Paratotus. They're very distinct, different teeth, and it doesn't really make sense to lump everything within Ototus because then you would have like Ototus hadani and then Ototus benetoni and Ototus megalodon. It's just that's a lot when these things clearly changed very much. But I do think that you have a lineage where you have a Cretalamna lineage that evolved into what we call the Ototus lineage. I don't think that it's a chronospecies necessarily from Ototus obliquus to Megalodon. I think that the chronospecies begins when you start serrating the teeth because there's other sharks like Paratotus, for example, that may have also split off from these unserrated Ototus teeth.
Hmm.
Megalomna is another one that gets squirrely phylogenetically. And then there's other Paratotus-like teeth that Syverson has mentioned in previous literature that they may not be true Paratotus, but they have teeth that have certain similarities, which could be offshoots, and those may also have come from Ototus. So I would basically say that the definitive chronospecies would start with the earliest instances of serrations within Ototus, so like Mugatsaharchus, for example. And that's why I personally still use Carcaricles rather than Ototus for that lineage onwards.
Interesting. So with Cretalamna, we know that we have this medium-sized shark that lived in the late Cretaceous and was an ancestor to the Megalodon. Yeah, the genus rather was ancestor to Megalodon. And so that makes it cool just because of that gives it lore, but at the same time, you have to think about it within the context of the Western Interior Seaway. This thing wasn't that significant. I would say it was probably middle of the trophic level somewhat small shark that was staying out of the way of the bigger predators. So taxonomically interesting for sure, and that gives it points. I don't think it should get A or B tier, but I don't think it should go lower than C. I think C is really comfortable for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it is cool too that Cretalamna was still alive within the Paleogene as well. At least what we call Cretalamna has still been alive at that point. I do find that interesting, but yeah, like you said, this species itself is not really anything special outside of that we have some pretty decent fossils of it. So I would say like a C or D tier, as much as I do love sharks.
No, not D. D's too low. I feel like guilty putting it in C. I actually found a Cretalamna Catoxodon too today, and I lost my mind. I thought it was so cool. So, you know, I really like him, but yeah, C tier in a total respect to the all the fauna in the Western Interior Seaway.
What do you guys
I could
think?
see that. Yeah, I'd say C as well for
C,
all the
C's fine.
reasons you guys have kind of said. Yeah, C is getting busy.
Average, the mediocre. Our next one is Cretoxyrhina manteli, which this I don't think warrants a C.
No, it doesn't. Cretoxyrhina manteli is so cool. You can correct
Absolutely not.
kind of stuff because I only know probably the layman fossil hunters amount of information about Cretoxyrhina manteli. But big eyes. It's thought to be one of the fastest sharks that's ever lived. Similar in speed to the short fin mako shark. Had big old teeth. You can find its teeth embedded in things pterosaurs. Its feeding damage from Cretoxyrhina has been seen on dinosaurs that have floated out to sea. It's been seen on many mosasaurs and marine reptiles. Uh, really, really fast apex predators that were, I like to think, uh, adjacent to great whites. They kind of filled the same niche as great whites in my mind.
They did what great whites do, but better, I
Yeah,
think.
Yes,
yeah.
and they're
Oh,
bigger.
you eat
And what's
seals? I
also
eat
interesting,
dinosaurs.
they also, what's interesting about these guys is like when you think of like modern day great whites, for instance, like, well, these guys are obviously a lot bigger, but they kind of had what we think is like similar lifespans. So like around like maybe 40 years, but like typical like great whites wouldn't reach sexual maturity until a lot later than like these guys. They figured that these guys reach sexual maturity between like 4 and 5 years old. And for like a large shark, that's pretty unusual where most shark species are very late to reach sexual maturity, which is really a problem for them with, populations being decimated. If they're not able to reach, an age where they can reproduce, then, that really affects populations. But these guys being able to reach that sexual maturity so fast, that's impressive.
That
Yeah.
makes sense though. Like, think about where they lived.
Yeah,
Like,
they
Yeah,
had to,
the absolute thunderdome of
Yeah.
giant predators,
Yeah.
marine predators. And maybe we could talk a bit about why we know so much about Cretoxy Um, is uh, is that we have a not small amount of their vertebral columns preserved in the fossil record. Does that extend to other sharks of the Western interior, or
um,
most of those Cretoxy?
I would say Cretoxyrhina is the best represented in the Western Interior Seaway in terms of skeletons. I can think of a few. Cretaceous is known from one specimen in the Western Interior Seaway. At least it's known from one specimen in
Right.
Kansas.
Squalocorax too. I found associated Squalocorax vertebrae in Kansas
Oh
before.
no, hey, that is so cool.
Neat.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Unfortunately, I
And
put
they
them in my pocket while I was fossil hunting in a bag and they wound up crumbling. That
No,
was
Oh,
tragic. But yeah, what's also cool about Cretoxyrhina is so like we say that they're bigger than great whites, and so your largest great white teeth you have can reach over 3 inches in length. But keep in mind that Cretoxyrhina, these are considered a small tooth genera, which means that some of these Cretaceous age lamniforms, they had smaller teeth in proportion to their body size than some of the modern sharks like great white do, which have proportionally larger teeth for their body size. And I have witnessed a over 3 inch Cretaceous being pulled out of Kansas. So if you think about the largest great white teeth compared to the largest Cretaceous teeth at around the same size, that
Yeah,
shark is
proportionally smaller.
massive. You're talking about a shark that's probably pushing like 8 meters in length for Cretaceous.
Ben, I would like
Awesome.
to say that I went like I have to admit, even though I'm in more involved in the academic realm, fossil hunting still runs deep in my veins. I'm still interested in what the biggest tooth is. And I went on this I spent an evening trying to figure out what the largest Cretaceous tooth ever found was.
Mm.
And so if you Google it, Google will tell you it was found in Dallas County. It was 2.71 inches, I believe. And I found one specimen online that I thought could be bigger, that could possibly represent a world record. And it was under 3 inches. So if you personally witnessed a 3 inch tooth being pulled out, that's like worth comparing to other specimens to see because that might be like low key the biggest one like that there is. A 3 inch tooth is nuts. And if you were there to witness that,
Mhm.
that's insane.
If I recall, I think the Sternberg has it now. I'm not entirely sure,
That's
but
good.
I was in shock when I saw it.
That's good. What do you think about okay, so Cretoxyrhina as a genus has I think what, four species in it, and it's also considered a possible chronospecies, like a case of anagenesis. What do you think about that? Do you think that's real?
I think that for the most part it is. I guess some of it depends on if you think that things like acrolomna are valid or not. Cretoxyrhina, you can see a clear pattern, like with Racronensis, where you have the cusplets and you have a more narrow crown. And then as you go towards, like, I guess, so that's in the Cenomanian. If you go towards the Turonian, you see a narrow formed tooth, but you see the cusplets start like melding onto the main crown. And
Mhm.
then within basically like after that point on, you have Cretoxyrhina manteli, which is a broader tooth, and they tend to not have lateral cusplets, although you will on occasion see some that do. So I think that those you have a pretty clear lineage as well with Cretoxyrhina. And that what I find cool is you see these clear lineages pretty decently represented within the mackerel sharks as a whole. Like, yeah, you'll have some gaps and stuff, but you have like the great white lineage you can see fairly clearly. You have the megalodon lineage, like I said, you have Cretoxyrhina. I don't think that that's really common with anything else for the most part. Those clear transitions throughout deep time.
Well, that's really cool. I really like Cretoxyrhina. I think this is an S tier shark.
I
It's the
agree.
king of the
Yeah,
Cretaceous.
I
So
think so.
Yeah. I love this shark.
Yeah,
It's
I
pretty
would go
neat.
S tier.
Are there vertebral columns more calcified, which is why we're getting more of them in the fossil record? Or is it just a preferential preservation based on where they were living?
no, they're definitely denser. Like they're more likely
Okay.
to their vertebral columns than the rest of the cartilage in their bodies. They're definitely denser. So yeah.
So our next one is Dalichorhynchops
I got it. It's okay.
osborni.
Deinonychus osborni. Um, Deinonychus is interesting. This thing was originally found in Kansas. It's a plesiosaur. And for those who are listening, imagine a penguin looking at a penguin from top view. So imagine a penguin swimming through the water. You're looking at it from the top, but give it an extra pair of flippers in the back. Okay. That's kind of how Deinonychus looks. Polycotylids as a whole, they all kind of look the same, in my opinion, to the inexperienced eye. And this,
They vary a lot in size, though, which I was sort of very surprised by during at my recent visit to the LA County Museum and seeing their 100% complete polycotylus on display, and that thing is as big as 25 to 30 feet,
wow,
enormous.
wow. I didn't know they were that big. That's pretty impressive.
It was also pregnant.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Sorry, yeah. I don't know much about these guys, but I've got a pretty interesting point on the pregnancy because it overlaps with ichthyosaur stuff a little bit. So
okay.
I've done a deep dive on it.
Yeah, I'll wrap up my little thing on it soon. Basically, what I can say about Deinonychus, it's your I would say it's the face of the polycotylids in the Western Interior Seaway. This is probably the most famous polycotylid. Uh, and from there on, like they're not too special in the trophic levels. I would call them they are a predator, but they were probably willing to dodge other predators. Like, you know, a Cretaceous could eat a small one. A mosasaur could eat small ones. These big ones, maybe they were hunted. I'm not sure, but they're pretty interesting. They're not too common, and I've found a polycotylid before, so that makes me like polycotylids.
Mhm.
But as a whole, they're kind of just a mid tier.
Yeah.
And do you want to
And
explain the differences, or I guess the phylogeny between plesiosaurs, polycotylids, and pliosaurs?
Well, so polycotylids, they're within Leptocleididae. You have let me just zoom out. So plesiosaurs as a whole, when you're calling something a plesiosaur, you can mean a few things, and those groups that fall within it, the most common that people are referring to are the elasmosaurs. So those are the plesiosaurs with the long necks and the small heads that were eating fish. The polycotylids, like Dolichorhynchops, and the pliosaurs. Pliosaurs are things like Liopleurodon. Um, they look like basically, well, if you're going to look at this, it just looks like their neck is getting shorter. That's not really what's happening. But polycotylids look halfway between an elasmosaur and a pliosaur. Pliosaurs have very big heads and small bodies compared to that head. They're basically just like a swimming Pac-Man with a short neck. And then elasmosaurs are very graceful, these long necks. And Deinonychus, like I said, they look a bit like a penguin. They have a sizable neck. Some have long necks. There was one described not too long ago that has a long neck for a polycotylid, but nowhere close to an elasmosaur. Um, but yeah, they're all plesiosaurs, but they're separate clades. So polycotylids are definitely separate from the pliosaurs, which are also definitely separate from the elasmosaurs. But overall, they are united in that you can call them plesiosaurs.
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think.
so these guys grew out. These guys evolved from long-necked plesiosaur ancestors, not from the pliosaurs, not from the short-necked pliosaurs. So they were a second attempt at plesiosaurs to become normal.
Yeah,
Easier
true,
to get short necks.
true.
Uh, these guys are short-necked, long-necked plesiosaurs.
That's true. Yeah, and they have nice long faces too. Their faces also got long and skinny. They're just yeah. They're basically elasmosaurs trying to look like pliosaurs. You know, if you had to really grossly generalize it.
Hmm. I would probably put them in D tier.
Yeah. Oh, hold on. I got some cool stuff to share that might change people's opinion. It looks like polycotylids. How far out we can bring it to plesiosaurs. First off, this big Polycotylus fossil of Polycotylus proper was like the nail in the coffin that determined that plesiosaurs actually did give birth to live young. And people historically thought that they were dragging themselves on the land to lay eggs. Then people came along and their bodies probably couldn't support that. But then this fossil definitely put the nail in the, these guys definitely, plesiosaurs generally definitely gave birth to live young. Why we don't have more pregnant plesiosaurs in the fossil record, especially compared to something like ichthyosaurs, which have like every other ichthyosaur we have is pregnant, and mosasaurs, which also probably almost certainly gave birth to live young, but have no gravid examples in the fossil record. These guys, the Polycotylus that was found that's currently at LA County, had a one singular offspring, so very K-type, and a bone histology paper. They've definitely buried the lead on this one, but in the bone histology paper on plesiosaurs, they sectioned juvenile polycotylid remains and found that these guys were putting on upwards 75% of their mass in their first year of life, which is only feasible, only seen in modern animals, and really only feasible with very strong parental investment. So These guys were very K-type strategists and probably having a single, uh, I don't know what do you want to call a baby plesiosaur pup,
Yeah,
and that lived with the mother for at least a year after birth.
that's cool.
Um, and I think that's probably maybe not how strong evidence this is, but it's definitely not unreasonable to think these guys had somewhat sophisticated social relationships because all the modern animals that do that
Mhm.
have this parental care as the core of their whales mainly of their social relationships. So I think that kind of depth in different types of social relationships in the marine reptile record is incredible, and I love these guys for it.
You've
Mm.
convinced me. And I think
Yeah, wow.
C
Yeah.
I think C tier would make more sense, and we might have to start moving things in. We might have to start moving things out of C tier soon if we can only take five. So that puts
I
four.
I kind of want to see these guys in B at least.
Really? Okay. You know what? Fair
Yeah,
enough. I like marine reptiles. We need more in B tier. There you go.
right.
So we're thinking B on it.
Yeah, you can't call Bonerichthyes B tier and the Lincoln C. You're right. We'll put it
Yeah.
at B.
Maybe even A tier.
No, no,
I
no,
think you're
no.
pushing your luck on
A
that.
A
We
for
have
awesome
some really
moms.
good stuff coming.
By
Sure.
the way, when you mentioned that mosasaurs have avid specimens in the fossil record, I just have two quick things to address that. One,
Please, because I don't actually know that much about this.
there was a paper published in Nature, which I would like to submit as a candidate for arguably the worst Nature paper of all time. Um,
The the,
claiming,
the Antarctic egg.
yeah, an egg from
Yeah.
an fossilized egg from Antarctica, and they were claiming it was a mosasaur egg, which I don't know how that even passed peer review, let alone got into Nature. Um,
Okay.
it wasn't a mosasaur egg. Plot twist number
Right.
two: there is a gravid mosasaur known.
Okay.
That one is Plioplatycarpus as well, I think. But for some reason, I don't know what mosasaur researchers be doing with these amazing specimens and just not publishing on them. That one is also unpublished, and it's been known for decades. So no one has bothered to
Yep.
publish. Maybe it's because it's like low key common knowledge that it exists. So now if you publish on it, it's not going to make too much of a splash. But yeah, there that one is known. And
That is a shame that that's languished in obscurity.
yeah,
It's
so
very
yeah,
typical though with
there.
examining specimens though, depending on where they are and what museums. Like one thing I just learned about a certain museum, I won't name names, but they actually charge researchers just to go into the collection to examine specimens, which I don't know many museums that do that, which it's so you do kind of find a lot of, things going untouched and unlooked at in sitting in museums that, so like you said, things are going just untouched and unpublished on.
That's a
This,
Some of
shame.
that is museum access.
this
Our next one is Elasmosaurus platyurus.
Platyurus. Elasmosaurus platyurus. All right, well, dope. I like elasmosaurs. I'm not gonna lie. Of the plesiosaurs, I know the least about them. Um, but they're cool. They're an evolutionary novelty. They're not very endemic to the Western Interior Seaway because there were elasmosaurs in, for a while in the Jurassic. So, they're interesting. They're fish feeders. I like that they have this long-necked adaptation that humans have been wrangling with the function and purpose of for a long while. Personally, I think it's to remove the actual food capture device, i.e., the head, as far away from the body as possible. So that a shoal of fish might think that the creature itself is where the body is, and then they get eaten because lo and behold, there's this head up in the shoal. That's the most reasonable explanation I can think of.
Yeah.
Or
But when this was originally constructed, that skull was actually put at the end of the tail. So, which,
Right.
when
This
you're looking
is
at this is like it's one of the longest neck creatures that ever lived. I think it's like second most number of like vertebra. So I can see like why someone would think that the head would kind of go on the opposite end.
And you know what?
well,
We can thank the Elasmosaurs for gifting us with the beautiful drama that was the Cope and Marsh
yes.
controversy, because that is
Yeah.
this ignited
This is
that.
the flashpoint that I mean, they've been backstabbing each other earlier, but this is really the flashpoint that sets it off. And I want to push back a little bit on the idea that that you could see how you'd put the head on the wrong end. Um,
Not
Cope was
skeletally, but
did it,
like, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And but like when Cope's working, we have two complete specimens of giant Mesozoic reptiles known, and one of them's plesiosaurs.
Mhm.
So he had access to this information, and he just miffed it, man. He did a terrible job on this one. He should have known better.
And
Uh,
for those who are listening and don't know the story, basically, E.D. Cope, Edward Drinker Cope, he looked up to Othniel Charles Marsh in the beginning. Othniel Charles Marsh was almost a mentor of sorts, right in the beginning. Like they had a decent, friendly relationship. And then it was when Othniel Charles Marsh was like, dude, what are you doing? You put the skull on the wrong end of this thing. That Cope really got sensitive and really upset with Marsh. And from then on, it was chaos. So
yep.
that's the story for those
Um,
familiar.
And they
yeah,
were
and
bombing like their own sites to keep the other basically out of, from finding anything else in their sites that they had maybe left behind. It was
Yeah, there
yep.
was espionage.
nuts.
They had spies. They had spies
Yep.
spying on each other's sites. Like it was
Yep.
crazy.
They were like weren't they like planning train robberies at one point? Like they were like discussing that idea, something like that.
Surprised.
I'm not a Bone Wars expert, but
What I really
uh,
what I really like is that when uh E.D. Cope died, his final wish was to have his brain removed and compared to Marsh's to prove that his was bigger. Which
Oh,
yeah, Cope
wow.
had an ego. Cope really wanted to be well. One, he was a eugenicist, so he was a very neurotic and egotistical man, to say the least. And Marsh was too. But Cope was a eugenicist, and he was also, whereas Marsh, let's be honest, Marsh won the Bone Wars. Um, Cope was a lot more prolific in modern modern reptile publications, and like you don't have to go very far in modern reptile classifications to find Cope's name everywhere. Cope actually tried to make himself the type specimen for mankind,
Right.
like his own bones, the type specimen for Homo sapiens, because him as a an Anglo-Saxon man would have been the hierarchical pinnacle of human evolution
that's
in the mind of a 19th century eugenicist.
he wanted to be the holotype for Homo sapien. That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Story of the
Okay, so speaking of
Diplodocus is my
holotypes,
favorite Bone Wars story, I think, though, but that can be for another time. But
yeah.
the whole
Um,
Diplodocus thing was incredible.
Well, back to Elasmosaurus.
yeah.
The I think what's
So,
interesting about Elasmosaurus is kind of what we just discussed. As far as elasmosaurs go, and I'm sorry, there's probably a plesiosaur researcher right now that's like fuming at what I'm about to say. As far as elasmosaurs go, they're not that interesting. I don't know. Like I think a layman when he sees elasmosaurs wants to see, oh, which one has the longest neck? Albertinectes has the longest neck, not like or like
right.
Mhm.
which one has interesting adaptations, like the filter feeder in Antarctica. So like, you know, like they're run of the mill elasmosaur, which makes they should be. I mean, they're the namesake of elasmosaurs. So yeah.
Well, part of the problem with Elasmosaurus, and I didn't know this till recently, and it's very much the opposite of what I assumed, is that there's only one specimen confidently referred to Elasmosaurus platyurus, and that's the holotype.
Hmm.
It otherwise has a poorer fossil record than the other Styxosaurus, for example. But
Yeah.
somehow its name is the one that's stuck as like not just its family, but its entire plesiosaur group of plesiosaur radiation generally.
Huh.
That is
I,
interesting. Especially because like when you think of plesiosaurs, I feel like you usually think of Elasmosaurus rather than like plesiosaurus or
Right,
something else.
yeah.
Mhm.
right.
Well, they're famous. There's a lot of lore behind them. I don't think
And
they
what's
should.
the max size on them?
I don't know actually.
33 feet. I mean, the max
Yeah,
size
I
on the
think
one
in the
we have
30s.
is like 33 feet.
Hmm.
Okay,
Sorry, yeah, about 30 feet.
dope.
Yeah, I mean it's decent. I would probably, I mean, C tier's kind of tired by now, but I would say C tier.
I think they're cooler than C, but
I'll
I
put
think
D.
Well,
C's are gonna have to start moving around.
yeah. And
Mhm.
Elasmosaurus is also from the Pierre Shale, correct? Whereas, so a more like late Campanian as opposed to Styxosaurus, which is from the Niobrara proper.
Huh.
Mm. So we're thinking it's not C tier.
I I actually just said that without being sure that that's correct. So I'm going to double check that real quick. But
Mhm.
Okay, well, I'm looking at what we got, and you know what? I think Elasmosaurus is to plesiosaurs as Cladastes is to mosasaurs. It's just there. Like it's not good or bad. It's just there. So like I think C is actually very fair. If we're gonna put Cladastes in
Mhm.
C, so should Elasmosaurus.
that's fair.
Yeah.
But I think that's decent. So our next one is
Yeah.
Encodus pertrosus.
Oh, me and
Yeah,
my
and
love.
I was correct about Elasmosaurus being from the Pierre Shale and not from the Niobrara.
Let's go.
Awesome.
I like Encodas, dude. These things are so rapid. They're very common. Every time I go fossil hunting in Turonian or Cenomanian strata, I find the palatines and fangs of these things. Um, they're some of them got kind of big, as far as I know, and they probably did school. Um, they, I just think it's so metal that the sardines of the Cretaceous period have huge fangs like this. You know, these were the fodder that probably most things were eating. They're some of the most common fish that I can think of from the Cretaceous period, and they're pimped out, dude. Like they've got fangs. They're cool. I like them. They're very
They do have
spun.
really massive teeth. What was that deep sea fish that we talked about that looked very much like these Encodus?
Oh,
Hmm.
Was it the Balaton
There's
saber-tooth, was it?
there's a few. There's like an oplagaster, the fangtooth, viperfish. I can't remember, but it's, like, I would say like maybe Coliotis. Yeah, I like these guys fine, but I mean, as far as they are, like you said, they are super common. They are, pretty metal, but they are also, there are some a lot of fish today that are way cooler, and there's a lot of, I don't know, they're fine. I like them okay.
they probably
Yeah.
supported like they probably did some serious heavy lifting in supporting the lower trophic levels and like being the
Hmm.
lower trophic levels in the Western Interior Seaway. I bet these things probably got eaten by everything with how small and how common they were.
Yeah, they were like 30 inches, something like that.
I
I mean,
think
it's a
some of
that's
them got bigger.
times, yeah. It
Oh,
depends.
really?
Not by
Um,
a ton though, I don't think.
yeah.
It is funny that the Western interior was so like dangerous that if you just want to be a normal fish in it, you have to be just built for violence like these guys are.
Yeah.
Yeah, they look crazy. I love them. Cool. Well, I'm gonna say D tier.
D?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a D.
Prepare for F.
Yeah.
Because I don't know
Comparative.
what else is going to go in F besides these guys.
Our next one is Encoteuthis melani.
Did these used to be Tusoteuthis
Yes, yeah.
and they got redescribed? Dude, I had a fascination. I wanted to find one so bad, just a big old pen. It's interesting to think that the Cretaceous had its own analog to the giant squid, which is pretty solid. And were they even squid? Were
More
they
closely related to octopuses.
really cool? I like it. They're cool. I don't know anything about them. When I did do that, when I did do my little exploration of them, I was pretty new to this, so or pretty new to paleo. So yeah, I haven't. But I do know they got redescribed, and I do know they were a big old cephalopod in the Western Interior Seaway. And I love cephalopods. I'm pretty biased, so I think
Mhm.
pretty like top three tiers for sure. They're mysterious to me, but they're super interesting,
Yeah.
and I feel guilty for not knowing more. Honestly, I should have like sat down and researched some of the things that I'm not too familiar with right before this, but I didn't.
Yeah, I should have researched this one instead of Baculites. Sorry about that.
My mind says they're cool. How about this? Let's do. Can we see the
Yep.
list? How about this? I think the fact that you had a late Cretaceous analog of the giant squid is cool enough to put them in B tier, but I'm so prepared to move them down lower because I fully admit that I know almost nothing about them.
What tier did you say?
I said B, but I'm
B.
prepared to move them lower if need be.
I would do B
Let's
as
go.
well.
I like that they're mysterious to me too. Like I almost don't want to learn more about them, you know. I like kind of having this little like thing that exists.
Yeah. Our next one is Globidens decodensis.
Me and my homies love Globidens. I don't know why I didn't choose Globidens alabamensis because that's the one we get in Texas, but I forgive you. Globidens is so cool. This thing is the source of some controversy, apparently, that I discovered myself because I had a group chat yelling at me about it, but I'll get to that later. Globidens, remember when I was talking about how mosasaurs are separated into four groups? And one of those groups is the mosasaurians. These are the most interesting of the mosasaurians in my mind. They have round, crushing teeth. You may remember these from Prehistoric Planet. They have these round, crushing teeth, extremely robust jaws. Just their bones are dense. They're built like a tank. My friend Graham found a lower jaw of a Globidens recently, and you know how I knew it was Globidens without teeth? It was just built like so robustly. These could crush through probably anything they wanted to, and I don't know how big they got. They were medium-sized mosasaurs, and by medium-sized, it's still big animal, so that's like 20 feet plus.
Yeah, they were like 16 to 20 feet, I think was the average.
Yeah, yeah, I won't be surprised. Like
Yeah.
these things were solid. I don't know their hunting strategy. I thought it was interesting that Prehistoric Planet suggested that they were chasing ammonites in the water column, biting them, letting them sink, and then taking them out at their leisure on the seafloor, which I guess could explain some of the ammonites that have these picture perfect holes in them. Um, I've always thought that those holes in ammonites were a little too mysterious for me to try and confront because let's be real, any mosasaur could just crunch right through those if they wanted to. And so if it's only lightly biting these, just enough to pop holes in them and let the ammonites sink down so it can pull them out later, like Prehistoric Planet tried to depict, then that would make sense to me. But some people think that these weren't necessarily ammonite hunters. They're perhaps eating inoceramids and things. And you know what? This is one of those cases where two things could probably be true at the same time. I don't think anything that was Shelley was able to get away from these.
Right, and their evolution's like tied to the presence of Tychodus, right? Like one replaces the other.
It's been suggested that's a suggestion that
Okay.
exists. But Tychodus, the shell crushing shark, as a genus disappears. They start fading, but the very last one, the very last species disappears in the early Campanian. And you have globidens in places like the North Sulphur River in Texas, which is middle Campanian. So it is worth noting, like it is interesting that as Tychodus disappears, globidens shows up. And I've suggested that myself in my videos that they're tied together. However, I think there needs to be, if you want to conclusively prove this beyond all doubt, like, yes, globidens exists because Tychodus doesn't, you need probably just more data. But I think it's a
Yeah,
very,
you have a very thorough stratigraphic review to say something like that. But
yeah,
alternatively, this thing went extinct because this other thing outcompeted it is cooler, and that hypothesis should automatically take precedence, as we know.
yes, yes, yeah, that's way cooler. And
Yeah, that's how evolution works.
I don't think Tychodus went extinct because of globidens, because it was as a genus, the species were dropping like flies, you know. I don't know what I have some ideas, not good ideas, but like some thoughts about maybe what could have contributed to the decline of Tychodus. But yeah, if I had to bet my house on it, I would not say that globidens caused Tychodus to go extinct. In fact, I'm very positive it didn't. It's just it took advantage of that available niche, you know? I think that's reasonable.
I think Globidens is an A tier.
Yeah,
I do too.
they're some of the coolest
Yeah,
most.
I love them.
Solid.
Let's do it. Oh,
Very
and
neat. They've also got the nice little convergence with like marine reptiles can have put forth um, durophagus animals in every lineage in Sauropterygians, early Sauropterygians and ichthyosaurs like the mid-Triassic omphallosaurs, and then in mosasaurs. So that's cool. We love our durophagus.
You know what? I'm actually going to suggest S tier. I don't know. I think these are really cool. Of the mosasaurs, I have trouble thinking of a mosasaur that will surpass it in tier. And honestly, they have been a target of mine, like just in the field looking for fossils. They have been one of my primary targets ever since I started, and they are stupid rare. They're hard to find. If I found one, I think I'd hire on the spot. Like it's not getting better than that. So I don't know. I think S tier, no lower than A tier, but S tier is my opinion. But you know what? If I'm being outvoted for A tier, then I understand.
I
I could
could
see
see
them
the
getting
argument.
promoted.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yep.
let's do it. S
Well, I
tier.
guess if we're all in agreement, we can promote it, then yeah.
Money.
The next one is Hesperornis regalis.
You know what I wonder about these things? Hesperornis, for those who are listening and can't see this, Hesperornis regalis is a bird, and it was thought that kind of like penguins, it was flightless and it was swimming around in the water column. Um,
I think we still think that.
yeah, I
Like
just
I don't think there's a revolutionary paper that's proposed that they actually could fly, which would be pretty nuts.
yeah, that would be interesting. And again, I don't know much about birds, but what I've always wondered about is like how that possibly evolved in a place like the Western Interior Seaway, where you're the sitting duck to any predator that wants you. Like, I don't know
Right.
how.
And
Um,
what's cool is
my,
unlike penguins, these things had teeth, but I mean these teeth were like nothing in comparison to basically anything else in there.
I wouldn't want to be bit by one, especially consider how horrible these things would have smelled. Being birds that spend all their time in the water eating fish, like penguins already smell bad enough. Imagine how bad this thing would smell being bigger. So I went to Fort Hays State. I'm representing Sternberg right now.
Let's go.
And I learned my undergrad in paleontology was like I learned from Dr. Laura Wilson. This is her. She's the one of the world experts on Hesperornithiforms. That's her deal. She's done a lot of cool research in like reconstructing like paleo environments, like high latitude versus low latitude with these guys and their growth rates. Some really cool stuff. Um, so I think maybe underrated, but still not highly rated.
Yeah, I think they are underrated. If I've been personally looking for Ichthyornis fossils, I know of a few sites actually where they historically have in places that I hunt, and I've definitely been on the lookout. Birds are cool enough for them to be a high target on my list. But in the grand scheme of things, uh, big graceful penguin. So
Yep. And
Do
that,
they
that
even
dragged itself
stand
around on
on
its stomach
land?
on land. Nope.
Yeah, they
No,
moved around like a
they did the
seal,
loon
right?
thing. Yep. They did like the loon thing, which is to be
Yeah,
like, you know, just push it, like be on your stomach and just push yourself around with your back feet.
really,
yeah.
So,
God, what?
yeah, graceful is not the word I would use.
I,
Graceful in the water, not
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
not on
true.
land.
It's true.
that's
Like a
great.
seal.
Yeah.
Well, I think the fact that they're so highly adapted to a marine ecosystem, and of all the marine ecosystems they could have chosen, that one's the craziest. As if they got
Yeah,
to.
the fact that they can
Yeah.
exist in such contentious conditions is, I think marks in their credit. So,
Yeah.
They're
Um,
like the little mosasaur of birds.
I
I
think
would I would say C. I mean its adaptations to me make it not going F or D, but I don't see it higher than C.
I think B personally of the birds, it's the coolest.
B,
I think.
B for bird.
Yeah, B for bird, obviously. Ben, God, what do
So
y'all think?
you think B on this little penguin?
And to be clear, they're not actually penguins. They just like
Well,
happen
yeah.
to, yeah.
Well, they're big too. They're like 6 feet long. The big one, the
Yeah.
biggest species is. They're
Yeah, they're
not.
big. They're
Yeah,
huge.
I would not want to be bit by one of these things, or like even encounter it in the water. I think that would be a largely negative experience.
Hmm.
Our next one is Ichthyornis, which
Oh,
is the other bird you're talking about. And if I, is it still believed that these are the first instances of a beak found on a bird?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. That's interesting. I didn't even know you had Ichthyornis on this. Like, I mean it. Like, I thumbed through your taxon list so fast. It was right before getting on here. Um,
Yeah, I don't know anything about these guys. I think we would need like a one of those bird dinosaur connection specialists to even begin talking about
I know they're older
It's-
than
these
Heteroarch.
guys.
I know they're
Well,
older.
it
You do get them in Campanian strata. So there's that. That's interesting. But actually, no, pause. They are definitely not the oldest occurrence of a beak on a bird. I know there's some Chinese early
I know
Cretaceous.
Darwin looked a lot at
Yeah.
them though. Yeah, but
There's
Okay.
they're
Interesting.
small though. They're only like the size of like a pigeon or a little bigger than a pigeon, right?
dog. I don't know. I wish I could say
I think
anything
so.
with certainty about these.
I don't
If
think these
Darwin
are
looked at
very
that, that is
large.
that is pretty interesting.
But in
That's
my
probably
brief
if Darwin looked at them, that's probably the most interesting thing about it.
Well, in my brief research on creating this list, I came across a Yale video on them talking about how like the tip of the beak didn't have any teeth on it, and they were saying that they believe that it was the oldest, I guess, definitive beak on a bird that they found. So like the teeth would go up most of the way, but there would be a little portion past there that there wouldn't be any teeth. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, outside of that, I don't know, I would say D or F tier.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
F
We gotta.
F
It's
for
cool.
fly away.
Freak out if I found one. I'd be very, very happy. Like it would be a life-changing discovery. But like, let's be real. None of us know anything about it, which means none of us have ever been curious enough to learn that much about it. Thing on its
They
own.
were they were in Pod's Travels, which is cool. The dinosaur Discovery Channel Dinosaur Planet doc.
Hmm.
They were in that. That's points in its credit, I guess.
Our next
Sorry
one
again.
is Mesospondylus lindoi.
Yeah, Maya spawn. Yeah, so Maya mother, because this is actually the last occurrence of ichthyosaurs, gravid ichthyosaurs in the fossil record. One of the last occurrences of ichthyosaurs in the fossil record generally. So I'm going to use this. Do you have Platypterygius americanus on this, or are
I
we
do
just going
not.
to use? Okay, so I'll talk about both on this one. Ichthyosaurs. Uh, Originally, we thought that they lose diversity going into the Jurassic Cretaceous boundary. That looks like it's not really true. We actually have examples of specific species on both sides that classic Jurassic ichthyosaurs appearing in Cretaceous sediments. But their diversity is petering off um, by the Cenomanian. It seems it's kind of hard to tell. The fossil record from this time isn't great. Um, They're only ophthalmosaurids, and in ophthalmosaurs, you have two groups: the ophthalmosaurinae and the platypterygianae. Uh, are kind of alive past like the earliest Cretaceous, or have a record. Um, Platypterygius is, without a doubt, the most heinous car wreck of a taxon I've ever seen in vertebrate paleontology.
Wow.
There is currently there are currently a completely unresolved um, polyphyletic relationship in the clade. Um, and after talking with some ichthyosaur cladistics people, we need to do both a lot of lumping and a lot of splitting. It's an absolute catastrophe. There's like 12 proposed species of Platypterygius, if not if that. These guys broke off as their own group, which is the Myospondylus, and we have two of them showing up in the Western Interior Seaway, the mid Cretaceous Western Interior Seaway, the mid quote unquote mid Cretaceous Western Interior. So
What
they don't make it to the. Sorry, Jared.
I had a question. Like, what
Yeah.
states and especially what formations are they found in? Because I'm not gonna lie, the only ichthyosaur that I knew of from the Western Interior Seaway is Platypterygius, and I knew that Platypterygius is this like waste bucket taxon, but um, yeah,
Yeah.
my
Maybe not as waste
Spondylus,
bucket as we think, but yeah. Uh, my Spondylus is high latitude northern Canada, Northwest Territories.
okay, that's all right. That makes sense then.
So, but definitely Western Interior, but like not any of these traditional Western Interior fauna. Very much the earliest like iteration of the Western Interior Seaway. Both Myospondylis and Platypterygius americanus are platypterygians. So they come out of Ophthalmosauridae, but they have adaptations towards they're more robust in the skull and have absolutely gigantic front flippers. You know, huge, enormous hydrofoils of just extremely robust. And these guys were definitely not doing any kind of shallow water maneuvering. They were open ocean cruisers, which might be a big part of the reason that their fossil record in this time is so bad, is because ichthyosaur diversity is trending towards, you know, very open ocean habitats. So while there might be were in these shallow epicontinental seaways, maybe they're more common in, you know, like true deep water. Maybe not deep waters in diving, but deep waters in like open pelagic Pacific and Atlantic
Hmm.
places. They don't make it out of the Cenomanian as far as we know. It's common, you know, the paleo meme is that they were outcompeted by mosasaurs, but they're gone before we have any big mosasaurs on the scene. Um, they're great white shark size and probably pretty similar in habit. Very fast, very compact, and with, you know, big for ichthyosaurs, for, you know, Jurassic post Triassic ichthyosaurs, pretty big, robust set of chompers. Um,
That is one question that someone, and like I say, someone, maybe me, I don't know, someone needs to figure out. It's so much
yeah,
easier to point the finger and say someone else rather than take the responsibility yourself, am I right? But what made the ichthyosaurs go extinct? Because it definitely, I would like to say 100% was not the mosasaurs. The
yeah.
mosasaurs in the Cenomanian, none of the Cenomanian occurrences of mosasaurs are even called true mosasaurs. They only fall within mosasauroids. And think what you want. The agylosaurs, in my opinion, are mosasaurs proper. They don't deserve their own unique name, Agylosauridae. So I don't think that their own. They shouldn't be their own clade. But all that aside, Agalosaurs, as we know them, were not large animals. They were like a few feet long. And these, for the most part, are not early Cenomanian animals. The earliest mosasauroid, or so I'll just say mosasaur, but when I say mosasaur in this context, I'm meaning mosasauroidea as a whole. The earliest mosasauroid is Hasiosaurus from Israel, and that's 99 million years old. And it's, again, not a big animal. And so 99 million years ago, early Cenomanian, that's when the last ichthyosaurs were swimming around. Um, I would also like to point out that the pliosaurs, which
Yeah,
maybe,
we lose them at almost the same time. They get to the Turonian, right?
yeah, they get into the Coniacian actually, but barely, like by a
Okay.
thread. And
Okay.
ichthyosaurs have been coexisting with pliosaurs for millions and millions and millions and millions of years. So it definitely wasn't competition by the
Yeah, they
pliosaurs.
didn't do that to each other.
Yeah,
But whatever environmental changes are, because I mean, even on like, you know, we there's a faunal turnover both in the ocean and on land at the same time. It looks like sea levels are rising, things are changing in the oceans, and on land. A lot of dinosaur groups do not make it past the Cenomanian. Classical groups like, you know, allosaurs, depending on what you think about megaraptors.
hmm.
Um, you lose sauropods in North America. You lose spinosaurs. You lose stegosaurs. Probably went extinct a little earlier, but there's lots of groups from the early Cretaceous that do not make it past this boundary point. Um,
It's also
the
difficult to say whether something outcompeted it or if something went in and filled a niche that was left vacating or held off by
right,
like a thread from these animals. So, for example, when we look at the end of the early Cretaceous and then in the early late Cretaceous, you see lamniforms really start ballooning in size. So, like Cardobaudon, for example, that was a decent sized lamniform that started coming about. There's an undescribed one, Cardobaudon did from Australia that got pretty big in the Albion, and it was coexisting with like Kronosaurus and some of these last ichthyosaurs. But it's hard to tell whether these large lamniforms, if they outcompeted these marine reptiles, or if they simply were filling in a niche that was being left void from these animals starting to dwindle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The story of the ichthyosaurs is so romantic and mysterious, but back on the subject of this thing, I think it's really cool that Myspondylus represents among the last ichthyosaurs. Um, I find it interesting. I don't think it deserves the top two tiers, but it deserves
Yeah, it's not classic Western Interior. It's not classic Western Interior enough to be much higher than that. But even though it is an interesting animal that would have been among the most formidable in its day.
I'm gonna say this is actually, I know C tier is getting tired, but how many do we have? One, two, three, four. This is a good one.
I
And we
could
also,
put it in B tier.
yeah, B tier is also filling up. How about B tier? I think B tier makes sense.
Yep,
I think B tier
that's
makes
good.
So our B tier
Yeah.
is
So, um, one of the reasons that Platypterygius is such a train wreck is our matrices for these guys are not sufficient. A lot of our data points are coming from Gondwana and ichthyosaurs, which are only now kind of really being published on, and a lot of a lot of the classic specimens that we base these matrices on are one juveniles and two lost. So uh, the current matrices are not adequate, and hopefully those will be sorted out in the future. But as for now, this is one of the worst phylogenetic cases in vertebrate paleontology, in my opinion.
wow.
our next one is Megacephalosaurus eulerdi. This one I think would be an S tier.
Yep.
Ooh.
Megacephalosaurus is interesting. I know I've heard off the record from some folks who know a bit about marine reptiles that it might not deserve its own species designation. It might be a synonym of something else, which I'm getting to. Uh,
Sorry.
I don't agree with that. I think it does deserve to be its own species, but what I don't quite understand is what prompted the authors to give it its own genus assignment because it is very similar to Brachocinius leucasi. And I absolutely can definitely see it's its own species. Again, some folks don't even think it is. Some folks think it is B leucasi. And I'm not sure I agree. I haven't seen the specimen in person, so I can't say anything robust
It's
about it.
not many specimens though, right?
Yeah, not many at all.
I think it's
This
just the one and some one skull and it like referred question mark other bits and pieces, but
And there's
one
like a
skull.
neural
Skull's
arch,
beautiful.
maybe.
Yeah.
The skull is beautiful. It's a 100% complete pliosaur skull, but
Yeah, it's crushed though, but that's okay.
yeah,
You can work past that. You can remodel.
everything is. Yeah.
There's a I'm I have a friend actually who found a very large pliosaur skull right at the Turonian Coniacian boundary here in Texas. Not published on yet, but he's been prepping it. It's at SMU, so it'll eventually get published. There's this big skull at SMU, and I've seen it quite a bit because when I go prep my own specimens at SMU, that it's like right there. This very impressive animal, and that thing that's at SMU, I suppose you could call it either. Most of the differences between Brachocinius leucasi and Megacephalosaurus eulerdi happen in the palate, and the palate isn't preserved on the specimen at SMU at the moment.
Mhm.
So it can go both ways. Um, and we'll see what they eventually say with it. I'm not a plesiosaur expert, but yeah, really cool. It's the last pliosaur to have ever lived. So whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it Brachocinius or whether you want to call it Megacephalosaurus, the final answer is that whatever animal that is the last pliosaur, and that's really cool. And they're very large.
Which is awesome.
So
Yeah. Well, they're not that big. I mean, the tail of the pliosaur is the tail of the eternal downsizing, but these guys are like 20, 23 feet. Of course, when you say that on a pliosaur, that like doesn't mean the same thing as a 20 to 23 foot mosasaur. they're short-tailed, so and they're very broadly built in the
Their heads
torso.
are
So that's
massive proportionally.
yeah, that's a very big. A 20 to 25 foot pliosaur is a much bigger animal than a 20 to 25 foot mosasaur is.
For sure. The skull at SMU, it's like 5 feet long, probably. Like it's huge.
Yeah.
It's giant. So, um, yeah, no, they're really cool. I like them a lot.
Yeah, last of one of a like a truly awesome group of reptiles. So I love
And
them for that.
they coexisted with some decent sized mosasaurs. There were big mosasaurs in the late Turonian. There were big mosasaurs in the early Coniacian, like Tylosaurus iambiensis. That was a large animal. It was like more than 20 feet, you know. So Tylosaurus nepiolicus as well. That's a Coniacian taxon. That's also like quite large. So it's probably the mosasaurs that were the final nail in the coffin for these things. I know that the pliosaurs as a whole were fizzling out well before the mosasaurs even
Oh, yeah.
existed. But for this specific species, I think the mosasaurs became the reason that pliosaurs didn't make a comeback. Like I can easily see mosasaurs outcompeting megacephalosaurs and driving the extinction of this taxon.
I still think it's an S tier. I love
That
my
makes
short neck
sense.
Yeah,
pliosaurs.
I S tier
I think S
maybe.
tier, but I love this thing, but S tier, but maybe get ready to bump it down to A.
Yeah, I'm gonna say A tier only because there's like in the scientific community, I wouldn't say it's consensus that it's dicey, but some people have their doubts about like its taxonomic classification. But let's be real, this is paleontology. Everyone has doubts about everyone's taxonomic classification. So, yeah,
There's so little, so few specimens, I think it's understandable.
yeah.
So do we
Yeah,
think A or S?
Let's do S and be ready to bump it down to A if we need.
right. I
I
think that's
think
good.
that's fair. But honestly, I would bump Globidens before I bump this.
No, no, I won't let you. I won't let you.
Our next one is Mosasaurus hoffmanni.
Bro, me and my homies love Mosasaurus hoffmanni. This this thing has grown on me. I'm not gonna lie. Like I know it sounds weird coming from someone whose research interest is in mosasaurs, that I've never been drawn to Mosasaurus hoffmanni, but I do have to give it its credit. Um, this was the first mosasaur ever discovered. It was discovered in Maastricht in the Netherlands. That specimen was stolen by Napoleon and his French army, and it still exists in the Paris Museum, despite many petitions from the city of Maastricht saying, "Hey, we want our mosasaur back," and Paris is just, mm-mm. So it's pretty cool. It has a long history. It was one of the animals that inspired folks like Darwin to, have ideas about evolution. So, or not evolution, sorry, extinction. Perhaps extinction is a real thing, and Mosasaurus hoffmanni was one of the.
I think this is the first giant extinct reptile that we find. Like it like it's edges out like the earliest like ichthyosaurs from Lyme Regis slightly. We
Yeah,
didn't know it was a reptile for a bit. They were like, maybe it's a whale, maybe it's an amphibian, maybe it's a blah blah blah. But like I think
yeah.
this was the first giant Mesozoic reptile known to the scientific community.
It was discovered in the 1780s, I believe. I don't remember the precise year, but I think the 1780s. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, no, this thing's been around. They are big animals. I think it's pretty interesting that it's just like a weird piece of luck that the first mosasaur ever found also happens to be the largest.
Mhm.
And we have many species. We have over 100 species have been proposed of mosasaurs, not mosasaurus, but mosasaurs. Over 100 species have been proposed. And this is still king. This is still the biggest one. Um, the holotype has a really nicely preserved palate, which, because that exists in the first specimen you find, you might think that's a common thing. No, it's like one of the only well-preserved palates, like perfectly preserved palates that exist in mosasaur specimens. Like it's not a common thing to find. So, they're cool. They're really large animals. They're very popular in media. Um, they had a global distribution, and it's very easy to refer things to Mosasaurus hoffmanni because it's just like, oh well, you can. It used to be a waste bucket, not anymore, but Mosasaurus as a whole, people called all sorts of things Mosasaurus that weren't. But Mosasaurus hoffmanni genuinely, I think, did have a global distribution. That you find its fossils in North America, you find its fossils in Europe, you find its fossils, in Africa potentially. There have been some papers suggesting that some teeth, some Moroccan teeth belong to hoffmanni. So this thing was pretty cool. It was pretty widespread. It was the face of the, not just the Western Interior Seaway, but mosasaurs in the late Cretaceous. I think A tier is solid.
And
Like
how
it's,
large do you
Yeah.
think these got?
so that depends. In the original monograph, like the Mosasaur Bible by Dale Russell in 1967, he proposed that mosasaurs as a whole, and I think he was basing this off Mosasaurus hoffmanni, have about a 1 to 10 ratio for skull to body size. And so that little snippet of information, this like, okay, a mosasaur's skull is 1/10 the length of its body, has been used on some specimens of Mosasaurus hoffmanni to extrapolate 50-foot lengths. Now, there have been some questions about whether Dale Russell was correct to say that. It was kind of a generalization and he didn't support it that well. But in either case, these are still well over 40 feet long. There's no way you can argue that they didn't reach 40 feet. And I think they were bigger. I think a 50-foot Mosasaurus hoffmanni is definitely feasible. There's a really, really large dennary that's known. I don't remember the specific number, the accession number for it, but there's a dennary that's bigger than any associated specimen, and it's a broken dennary. Like the dennary is the lower jaw for those who are listening. It's a broken dennary, but it's huge. It's absolutely giant. There are enormous quadrates, isolated Mosasaurus hoffmanni quadrates, which are ear bones that are also known and seem bigger than the holotype. So yeah, no, these got really big. I'm gonna say 50 feet. It won't surprise me at all. But if I want to be as precise and technical and scientific as I can, I'm gonna say between 40 and 50.
I mean, there's unpublished material that's supposedly bigger. I keep hearing about.
Yeah, I won't be surprised. There's
Yeah.
it's like the T-Rex of mosasaurs, it's very popular to publish on. Lots of folks want to publish on it and make big claims about it. Some folks are very protective of Mosasaurus hoffmanni material, i.e.
And
So, you know,
yeah,
So
I won't.
and
Say, yeah.
Mosasaurus is like a more common, after the Tylosaurus heyday to set up
Yeah,
uh, an important, turnover in Western Interior or in global marine reptile diversity over time. If the Tylosaurs are more common in the Santonian and then the early Campanian and then Mosasaurus later on.
yes.
I can't speak with much precision there, so maybe you can clarify that. But
No, you're right. Things like Conodon and Missouriensis show up in the Campanian. Uh, Missouriensis for sure. Conodon, I think some folks have complaints about Conodon, and to be honest, the mosasaurs that I look at are the basal species. So really derived stuff like this, like don't quote me. But yeah, no, the Tylosaurs were the kings. They were the Tylosaurus itself was the biggest mosasaur during the early Campanian. And for some reason, the Tylosaurs just kind of stopped showing up. I mean, Hinosaurus is a tylosaurine, and they show up, through the Maastrichtian, and they were themselves very big, like Hinosaurus bernardi and stuff. But they were not as diverse as the mosasaurines towards the end of the Cretaceous, and the biggest of the mosasaurines is Mosasaurus hoffmanni. So yeah, it does represent a faunal turnover. Um, they're cool. I think they're A tier. The only reason I don't give them S is because they don't have any super unusual adaptations the way Globulins does.
do you guys think A?
I think A
I think
tier, and because I'm saving S tier for a different mosasaur.
Uh,
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I want to see what other mosasaur could be S tier for you.
our next
Nyctosaurus.
animal is Nyctosaurus gracilis.
Yeah, sorry, I took the words out of your mouth. I'm not gonna lie. I know virtually nothing about pterosaurs. All I know about these is that they were in prehistoric planet. They're cool. That's some serious headgear, though. Nyctosaurus are, for those that are watching, if you saw Prehistoric Planet, you remember the pterosaurs that have the big like capital Y perched on top of their skull? That's an ichthyosaurus. Really unusual headgear. I have no idea what this is possibly used for. If probably just display, honestly. Like what else can
I
you
was
do?
thinking it's display for that, but I mean, I know they're also, I mean, other than that, I feel like they're kind of just a really typical soaring seabird, kind of like an albatross. I mean, other than other than their really cool headgear.
Yeah, they like of all the pterosaurs, they lose the most functionality they like lose the most development in their limbs, so they were walking the least. I don't
Mhm.
know. I wish I knew more about pterosaurs. I love them, but I don't know much about them. Uh, and
Yeah, I don't know why. I just can't get into pterosaurs. Like I've never had this compulsive urge to do a deep dive on them. Like it's happened for other taxa, but just pterosaurs as a whole. Like they don't bore me. Maybe I just haven't been bitten by the bug yet. Like one day I'm sure I will, but I just find pterosaurs hard to be interested in.
Yeah,
I just don't
I'll
know
say
enough
I've
about
never
these things.
what?
I just said I just don't know enough about these guys. I feel like they just have one seemingly very cool thing about them, and then everything else just seems just pretty basic as yeah.
You know what?
Yeah,
I'm gonna hurt some feelings and suggest D tier.
D. I
Yeah.
would be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
that's fine so long as a different pterosaur gets S tier.
Huh. Hot take.
Our next animal is Pachyrhizotus caninus.
Pachyrhizotus was such a weird, not super weird, but they're just such a. I think as I'm saying it now, I want to call them weird and cool, but let's be real. I just like them because I'm familiar with them. They're a very common fossil to find in Western Interior Seaway strata in terms of their teeth. And their teeth were, I was forced to do a deep dive on these because their teeth look exactly like small mosasaur teeth. They're very difficult to differentiate from mosasaur teeth.
Hmm.
Um, honestly, it's size that helps you the most. And people will say things like, oh, the bottom of their teeth. So if you look at their teeth, Pachyrhizotus tooth from the bottom, and then a mosasaur tooth from the bottom, you'll say, oh, okay, Pachyrhizotus teeth has this one flat side on it, mosasaur teeth don't, which is not true. I've seen associated cladastes specimens that have teeth that look exactly like Pachyrhizotus, even that flat side. So apart from that, they have a mosasaur-like dentition, and I kind of think of them as the tuna of the Western Interior Seaway. They're these muscular, fast, predatory fish. They even look a little bit like tuna, let's be real. So
How
they,
big are they?
um,
Like six.
yeah, they're decent size. So they're not like a bluefin tuna, which get like, or a yellowfin, which can get huge, like car sized. But yeah, she was right. They're like a 6 foot fish. Other than that, pretty standard fish, though.
I have a bag of, I think,
Cool. F tier.
Pachyrhizotus.
Oh, cool.
You said F tier?
Yeah, I mean, we
I mean,
what else are we gonna put in F tier?
I mean, it is kind of
Like,
just a
Yeah,
big fish.
maybe.
yeah, it doesn't have those cool fangs like Encodus does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, all it's
I,
got going for it is just Cretaceous tuna vibes, which is cool. I mean, it's a strong swimmer. Like, it's interesting and it has teeth, but let's be real. The Western Interior Seaway is so filled with insane animals that, like, even though it's cool, F tier is like, you kind of just have to.
Yeah,
You know,
I'd go F on it.
Sorry,
feel like
Peck.
I'm betraying my fish, you know, love, but yeah.
It's okay. We got Cretoxyrhina and S.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
Our next
Zosia
one,
bradii.
huh?
Parapazosia bradii.
You said that better than I could. Thank you. So
Yeah.
these aren't the largest ammonites, though this genus does have the largest. In the US, the species isn't as big as some of the ones elsewhere, but th this is still like the shell is human size. They get what, like 6 feet?
So,
Yeah, like 6 feet. Like,
for Parapazosia as a whole, actually, yes, they are all big, but the biggest species is Parapazosia separendensis from Europe,
Mm.
and I've read that the largest Parapazosia separendensis specimen is like an 8 foot diameter, like it's this gargantuan animal, and I don't know why you chose Bradii specifically. Oh, never mind.
The
It's
other isn't in the US.
yeah, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
in the US. True, that's why. So I agree. There are a couple others, Paraphysosia americana, I believe, and stuff like that. But I have found one of these actually, not a complete one, but one of my very first viral videos was finding a shell segment from Paraphysosia. So that makes me automatically like them. And it did fuel an obsession about large ammonites for a while. And I did some calculations at the time that, these things probably weighed thousands of pounds. If you were to haul them into a boat, just with how much water they're holding and how much the shell would weigh. Like these were big animals. Um, Biggest cephalopods of all,
To drain your ammonites before you haul them on board.
or sorry, not biggest cephalopods, biggest ammonites of all time. Um, they're
I
really
think
cool.
it is a biggest cephalopod, the European one. Like if you took the animal outside of the shell, I
Mhm.
forgot what the estimates were, but it was massive. I think longer than anything alive today.
Even a colossal squid.
Yeah, I believe
Probably
it's
not longer, but maybe heavier.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, they're really cool. They're really cool. I'd like to find a big one to see. Today I found an ammonite. Like when I was out in the field today, I found an ammonite that is barely bigger than if you were to take your pen, like a pen that you can click, like a clickable
Mhm.
writing pen, and you look at the little circle where the pen comes out of, it was about that,
Oh.
like the so small. I don't even know how I saw it. And then you get something like Paraphysosia. Ammonites as a whole, I mean, these size differences are unreal.
Mhm.
And to get such an extreme in a lineage like this is worth getting good points for. I'm gonna say top three tiers
Yeah,
is
that's good.
Yeah.
I would say A.
I think A too.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yep,
love these guys.
I like that.
Our next animal is Platycarpus tympaniticus.
Tympaniticus, yeah. Um, Platycarpus tympaniticus. So, okay, let's just go back to my scheme. So you have mosasaurs, and we can split them into four groups: Platycarpinae, mosasaurinae, tylosaurinae, halosaurinae. Now we're finally doing a non-mosasaurine mosasaur here. This is a plioplatycarpian mosasaur. So Platycarpus tympaniticus is probably I know it's a very old taxon. Platycarpus was described. I'm wondering if it's a Bone Wars taxon. I'm not sure, but it's an old taxon. It's been around forever, and they're they're interesting. There's a really, really, really nice specimen of it that exists that has things like tracheal rings and cartilage and scales. And it's probably the most common mosasaur to be found in the Kansas chalks. So, for those of you who are trying to get a sense of the mosasaur arena, Kansas is really kind of the birthplace of American mosasaur research. Or no, I would say New Jersey is rather, but Kansas is where the party really heated up. There are a lot of mosasaurs out in Kansas, and Platycarpus is top of that pile. They're all over the place there. And they're interesting because they are some of the first derived platycarpines. So beforehand, you have this basal stuff like Russellosaurus, Tethyosaurus, Dallosaurus, which is the stuff that I happen to be interested in right now. And then you start getting the first derived, like more advanced mosasaurs, things like Angolosaurus or Tylosaurus iambiensis and Platycarpus. So Platycarpus is cool for that reason in my mind. It was a generalist fish eater. Uh, so they didn't get too big. If I have to think about how big they were, I'm actually not totally sure. I'm gonna guess between 15 and 20 feet on average would be my estimate. Um, yeah, they're interesting. They're kind of like Platycarpus is to the platycarpines as Cladastes is to the mosasaurians. It's a run-of-the-mill platycarpine. And while they're interesting and they're very common and they were very successful, they don't have any super unusual traits about them.
I would probably put them in C tier.
Yeah,
Yeah,
C2.
Is
Cool.
C
Interesting
C
full?
map.
for carpets.
Oh,
Two,
We
three.
have
no,
one
we
spot.
got room.
All right, we're gonna have to start breaking some hearts because things are going to have to either go in S, A, or D and F. So I think things are going to start moving soon. I'm interested
Yeah.
in this. Cool.
Yeah.
The next one is Platyceramus platanus, which is basically a gigantic clam.
That is a huge clam. I'm
Yeah.
not. I thought inoceramids were probably the biggest clams in the Western Interior Seaway. This thing is unreasonably huge. This
This
I
is
is
think
the
This
it's
not an
largest, I think,
inoceramid.
bivalve that's known. They also, I think they have found specimens with pearls in them. Could you imagine like
Oh,
finding
cool.
like a gigantic pearl like the size of your head?
yeah.
that would be crazy.
Inoceramids did get quite large. They got person sized, and you can find in Texas actually inoceramid pearls. I wouldn't call them ultra rare, but they are uncommon. The only thing that is like kind of a bummer about finding a pearl in an inoceramid, and Platyceramus is probably a relative of inoceramids, I'm going to guess just based on the name. Um, so the only thing that's kind of a bummer about finding these Cretaceous aged pearls is they look like stone marbles. They don't really have much of a luster to them anymore,
Yeah.
but they
Mhm.
are interesting. I mean, knowing what that is and what it comes from and how old it is really, really cool. I would put more value in a fossil pearl than a real pearl these days. So to find a
I
huge
found
something like this would be nuts.
Yeah, I found some pearls and fossil pearls in Kansas. And what's interesting too is that you'll have some collectors out in Kansas that they don't really know much about fossils outside of they just like finding this stuff. And they'll still pick up these pearls that they don't know what they are or anything, but they still pick them up. And it's really interesting because they really don't look like much special unless you find like an absolutely perfect one that but even then they don't look that spectacular. Like
Yeah.
most of the ones you'll find have some pathologies to them. It's very rare to find like a full round one, like a perfect spherical one. I found, I believe, one of them on a 3-day Kansas trip.
I mean, this is what's cool about this is a huge clam, basically, is what you can just say about it. I don't know if they're a true clam, but you know what I mean. They're a bivalve.
Oh, so these guys are inoceramids. They're not part of
Yeah.
that genus, but they are inoceramids.
Cool. Cool. That's dope.
So these guys are part of that. Inoceramids are extremely common in the cans and chalks. My dorm room in college is made out of inoceramid rock.
Yeah.
Uh,
Dude, you take any limestone or sandstone in the late Cretaceous strata here and you look at it under a microscope, and it's basically just little Inoceramus prisms. Like it's just broken Inoceramus shells. These
yeah,
reefs were made of Inoceramus in the late Cretaceous
right.
period. Corals, maybe. Inoceramus, yes. Inoceramids, they dominated this time.
Yeah, and they're like the base of the food chain, and like maybe the most important base of the food chain for this Western Interior Seaway
I'm gonna be controversial and
ecosystem.
call this an S tier.
What? I was about to say,
Okay.
my childlike mind that likes big teeth. This is still just big clam. And I was going to suggest
Yeah,
that.
but look at how big of a clam that is.
Yeah. And it's big enough that it's almost like how coral reefs like support like little micro habitats. Like schools of fish were able to use these as like protection from things around them, like how things use like large rocks or coral now.
Yeah,
Like,
we do have fossils of fish schools inside inoceramic clams,
yeah.
That's
big
true.
inoceramic clams.
Okay, you know what? If we're going to put an invert in S tier, it has to be this one.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Send.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oyster bars go crazy.
Our next one
I was
is
hoping that would happen,
Farina.
actually.
Yeah, we got Protosfarina pernicosia.
Dude,
Perniciosa.
Protospirena is one of the coolest fish of all time, dude. Oh, maybe not, but like is such a cool fish. Their teeth, I have seen their teeth put into like fossil ID forums, and people arrive on a conclusion like, oh, this must be a theropod dinosaur tooth that washed out. Like they have crazy teeth. There some species get very large. I don't know anything about Perniciosa specifically, but as a genus, their Protospirena are rather common uh, finds for me. And some species, like in the um, in the later part of the Cretaceous, like the Campanian, possibly the Maastrichtian, have genuinely like big teeth, like I don't know, a few inches long. So, you know, you give a swordfish T-Rex teeth, that's a Protospirana. But they're not actually closely related to swordfish at all. It's just a happenstance of convergent evolution. But yeah, swordfish with huge teeth is pretty dope. I think these things are awesome. They
Crazy
deserve,
pectoral fins, though. I think that's
yeah,
something that it's the pectoral fins are crazy.
very long. I agree. These things are fast. I mean, they're so vicious. They're just metal as hell. How can you not look at this and think like this is one of the coolest animals I've ever seen in my life?
Yeah, it's
How
another
big?
one, another taxa that I found teeth of in Kansas, or at least from this genus.
Yeah.
How big are these guys?
Protospirana, as far as I know, I've never seen a complete skeleton in person,
They're like
but
2 to 3 meters.
yeah, I'm gonna say like
They're big.
no bigger than 10 feet, probably,
Yeah,
but on average, yeah, I'd guess
not
two.
not huge, but would beat me in a fight.
Yeah, they're like
Oh,
size.
yeah.
Swordfish size makes sense, especially considering they're kind of converging on the same niche.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is cool that it has a couple different weapons. It has that bill and then it has those really fierce teeth.
Yeah, yeah, they're really dope. I think A tier. I don't know
Eh,
about, but A is A is good. A is good for it.
Would you guys agree with A or
Yep,
something else?
Yeah.
that's fine.
I could see it going down to B, but I think right now I think B is pretty good. But yeah, A.
I have a proposition.
Yeah.
Can we move Bonarichthys down to D?
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Does Aaron agree?
Yeah, I don't know what
Yeah,
We can put
kind
it in
of.
F.
Yeah,
D or
I
F?
think we figured.
D.
F.
F.
That's
Oh, it's cooler. It's cooler than
What
Pachyrhizopus.
I'll let you be the tiebreaker
what
then.
else? Look at that list. What else is going to go in F tier?
Yeah, you're right. Let's put it in F.
You're doing
And
F?
then yeah, we got to think of another thing for F as well. I think F has got to fill up. Um, I see a couple animals that no, I don't. I see one animal that I might call lower.
Yeah,
Okay, so let me. Yeah, but this is a spoiler, dude. What the hell is that
I'd say
Inosaur?
maybe Nyctosaurus. I would put in F. Just I don't know if it's like headgear is
Dumb
cool enough
head,
for me to,
Yeah, I
you know.
agree.
stupid head. Put him in F tier.
Yeah, stupid
I'm
head.
fine with F on that.
And I'm not gonna lie. As far as mosasaurs go, oh, no. But let's put Baculides in F too. What the heck? Why is this thing occupying C? I like our opinions change so drastically as we get.
I
Yeah.
think Baculides in F.
Yeah.
How about D? How about D?
Okay, D, but I'm so gonna argue for F later.
Okay.
Oh, I like it D. You know,
D. All right.
Sorry,
the
Baculite.
blown out ammonite.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So the next animal in S tier is Pteranodon.
Nope.
Pteranodon longiceps. I don't know if I would do S.
Nope.
I mean, if you're
It's
going based on like
literally the
iconicness,
most famous pterosaur ever.
And
And
like
and
And it's
like
huge.
and if you're gonna ask a kid to name three like prehistoric animals, this is gonna be one of them.
they're gonna say
He's gonna call it a
pterodactyl.
pterodactyl, but yeah. But I mean, but he's talking about this.
I
Yeah.
think pterosaurs are low key kind of boring, and this should be lower than S tier, far lower. Like I'm gonna say C at best.
That's unbelievable. That's
I can't get into them. I don't know. And plus, hey, let me make my case. We're talking about Western Interior Seaway fauna. This thing is an air animal. I know it like fell into the sea, but that's just because it's a dumb idiot that can't fly. Like, come on.
is there any
Yeah.
biological reasons to put this in either S or lower?
it looks cool. It's a huge pterosaur. So it's one of the biggest non-Asdarchid pterosaurs. It's we've got such a good record of them that we can identify things like sexual dimorphism. Uh, I'm actually just going to rip off a skeleton crew bit right now, but there was a paper on an earlier paleontology paper looking at why do we have these two morphs of pteranodon that are each one's about 50% of the population and one of them's twice the size of the other one. And then it sets up, it doesn't actually run the statistical analysis on the graph that it creates. It just says just look at them. It's very obvious that this is sexual dimorphism between the males and the females. The big ones have the giant crests, the little ones don't. Which is very, very cool and way to write a paper without doing all the dumb nerd stuff like statistical analysis. So we've got what might be a chronospecies. We've got what Pteranodon sternbergi. Most people use Pteranodon sternbergi, not Geosternbergia, unfortunately. Turning into longiceps over time. The actual changing point is whether that is an actual example of anagenesis is not like locked in, but it's definitely a common take. A lot of the animals around the boundary where those two would cross over are not super referable to one or the other. They don't have a lot of cranial material preserved. Um, it's a giant dragon that flew over the most dangerous seas of all time. It's iconic. Everybody knows what it is. Uh, S tier.
20-foot wingspan. Yeah. Mm,
Yeah, I think
Uh,
high, like 20, like the big males are like 25-foot wingspans.
yeah.
Um,
let
I'm
me
still thinking
And they lived
C.
on offshore rookeries. Could you imagine like going to like a big rock and just having a whole bunch of these all over it?
right. It'd be awesome.
let's look at the list. Let's look at the list super fast.
I'm still thinking C. We have a nice open spot for it right there.
Oh,
How about this? I think we can get Aquila lamna into B tier and make room in A tier for Pteranodon.
I'll accept this compromise.
I'm thinking if we were to put in an A, I'm thinking the turtle goes down.
No, I disagree. I like Archelon too much.
yeah, I like them too.
Okay, so
And
what?
then,
Let's take a vote. How many people like if you'd rather move the turtle down or if you'd rather move the Aquila lamna down? So if you'd rather move Archelon,
I vote on Aquila Lambda.
I vote Aquila lamna too.
I want the turtle.
Uh-oh.
yeah, I'm kind of split. Kind of Team Turtle, though.
Oh,
Hmm.
betray the fish.
I know I'm awful. Ugh.
All right, and then we're going to put the Pteranodon in A. So our A is
But
still
we have a lot of
turtle.
good fish left, so it's okay.
Hmm.
Our
Okay,
next one's Tychodus mortoni. And
bro.
really, I could have picked many different Tychodus species, but I like Tychodus mortoni because I've seen pictures of some Tychodus mortoni teeth from I think Mississippi and Alabama that is literally like the size of your palm.
Dude, Ben, there's this Tychodus mortoni tooth that I'm aware of that was found in the Blossom Sands member of the Austin Chalk in North Texas. It is, yeah, again, the size of your palm, but it looks like it was cast out of metal. Like it's the most beautiful thing. I have to show this to you like after the podcast. Like it's gonna
Mhm.
blow you, it's gonna rock you. Like it's crazy. Tychodus is I'm gonna make my case that Tychodus is well worth your attention and love for several reasons. And I bet my followers are probably rolling their eyes because I never shut up about Tychodus. So, okay, reason number one, these were probably very K-selected species. So they lived for a long time. And this is coming from two papers that were looking at their bones. One is a paper from Spain that looked at some isolated vertebrae, or not isolated, they like came from matrix, but it wasn't a full skeleton by any means. So they're looking at their vertebrae, and then this paper on the Mexican specimens. That was Tychodus decurrens, probably. They listed it as Tychodus spa, like Tychodus, like they didn't differentiate the species, but looking at the teeth, it's probably decurrens. So anyway, long-lived species that could get pretty large. They, I guess, were lamniforms. I don't know how popular of a, I how agreed upon that is yet because that's still a
It fits.
new conclusion. So, but I haven't seen anybody deciding that. I haven't seen anybody trying to debunk that, you know. Um,
Or weird lambda if they're a lambda.
Yeah.
yeah, and
So
what
I so I've always thought that, or not always, but like for a long time, I thought that these fit in within Gallimorphi. And the reasons for that being like before they used to think that these were hybodonts. They thought these were batoids for a little bit. Histology testing at first showed a single anemoid layer, which is a non-Salacian trait usually. But a redone test found the so-called triple layer anemoid. And again, the I've went on the anemoid rant so many times before, but yeah, so the so-called triple layer anemoid in quotations is a uniquely Salacian trait. So we believe that it was a true shark for a good bit now. Their vertebrae are very similar to like the basking shark, the whale shark, and Corax. So those would have indicated it being a gallimorph. Their tooth design, the histology of the core of it is a little bit different than most lamniforms. So it's a pseudo-osteodentine, which is, I think, the most common of the um, histotypes within Salacians. But within lamniforms, it's exceedingly rare. You only have a couple others that have that trait. So I was skeptical to put it within lamniforms, but I would have had it within Gallimorphi, possibly within its own order, like what Sean Ham hypothesized before. But looking at the skeleton itself, it does appear to be a lamniform, and it is also apparently a very fast swimming lamniform, which was I think the biggest surprise from the
mm,
publication because
yeah,
people used to think that these were just like more benthic clam eaters. Because like as you've seen, there was a lot of really large bivalves at the time, but apparently these things are built more like a fast swimming oceanic predator that would have eaten like sea turtles and ammonites and things like that.
and for those of you who don't know about Tychodus, like here's the crux of it. What makes Tychodus interesting is imagine a normal shark's mouth. You know, you have the outside of the mouth is lined with sharp teeth. Tychodus, imagine the bottom and the top of its mouth are just covered in a total pavement of flat crushing teeth. Not all of them had flat teeth, some had peg-like teeth, but you just had these unusual crushing teeth. It doesn't follow just the outside of the mouth. It's entire quote unquote tongue, if I'm trying to personify this and make it a vivid image for you to imagine in your mind. Imagine your mouth right now, your tongue and your palate just being covered in teeth. There's no space for non-teeth. It's just only teeth. There are like 500 of these things, and these flat, ridged teeth look like fingerprints a little bit. And that was used to grip on a prey and just crush it in an absolutely grueling, shocking, horrible way to die. So, um,
Frenchie,
yeah, big
Captain
sharks,
Crunch.
big
No,
sharks.
over 30 feet. Like, I feel like
Yeah,
from this photo, it's almost hard to tell that it's because it's just, so it kind of looks a little like a salmon shark. But yeah, they got to be over 30 feet long. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
there
Oh,
we go.
yeah, I didn't recall if this image was supposed to depict Tychodus mordeni itself, so I covered the scale. And apparently there's other, very large Tychodus species. But from just the teeth that I've seen, I wanted to choose Tychodus mordeni. And it is a very prevalent Tychodus species too.
Yeah,
It was
more. I
one of
really,
the last species.
yeah, I agree. The very last species is Polygyrus, and one of the, you know, that was also a big species of Tychodus. So Polygyrus, Mortoni, Marginalis, those are some of the biggest Tychodus species that you get. And yeah, no, these things are so dope. Their teeth are very dense, so they fossilize quite easily. You find a lot of them. No other animal has a dentition like Tychodus. Like, let's be real. No other animal since Tychodus has had teeth or a mouth constructed like Tychodus. They're so unique. It's such a weird path for a lamniform to take.
Yeah, the closest thing would be hybodonts,
Yeah.
which some of them have crushing teeth that resemble Tychodus, but I mean those are very distantly related. Like those may not have div or those things may have diverged from the Neoselacians within the Paleozoic. So the fact that you'd have those convergent evolutionary traits is very, very cool.
And their teeth, in my opinion, look a lot different. But maybe that's just because I spend too much time looking at Tychodus. Um,
Well, it's superficial similarities,
yeah,
some of them.
yeah. And I mean, just the way their jaw is constructed is also like different. They have this weird twisty look going on with hybodonts. Um, so yeah, I think these are. It would be kind of a betrayal after years of hyping this shark up on all my social medias to rank it any lower than A or S. I can see it in A. I can see it in S. If you're
I
gonna
would do
put
ARS.
it, you
Hmm. I love them.
I think A. I like A.
Mm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That means we have to move something out of A.
I'm still going S on
Um,
it.
I
I'm going S. Just looking at what we have left, I think. I think
Yeah,
S.
yeah, let's do it. I like this. I like this. We got a good S tier list going.
Yeah, we do.
Our next one is Scapanorhynchus texanus.
Scaparorhynchus texanus is my how do you say this? Is there an opposite of a white whale? Like I find this tooth even when I don't want to.
a
They
black
keep
whale.
I guess true. They keep me from getting skunked. Anytime you do field work in the Cretaceous of Texas in definitely like Turonian, Cenomanian, oh no, not Cenomanian, but like Turonian, Coniacian spots, even Campanian spots, you find these regularly. And Scapanorhynchus is interesting because it is what we think of as a goblin shark. Um, However, unlike today's goblin shark, which is Mitsukarina austini, uh, these were also shallow water inhabitants, and they were very prolific. We have some excellent Scapanorhynchus body fossils from Lagerstadt in Lebanon that are Cenomanian in age, and they're cool, but only, in my opinion, only as cool as you can say goblin sharks are cool. Like goblin sharks are cool because of all their adaptations, but we still have some version of them today. They're not super unique just to the Western Interior Seaway.
Well, these things also got larger than the modern day Mitsukarina teeth. You can find Scapanorhynchus texanus teeth exceeding 2 inches
It's
with
true.
some sort of regularity. I mean, maybe it's not the most common thing, but it's like by no means unheard of. And
No.
if we were to push Scapanorhynchus over to some of the Maastrichtian stuff like Scapanorhynchus rapax, for example, you can find teeth exceeding 3 inches on that, which is a big goblin shark.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. These things get large.
We
Um,
got up to like 22 feet, I think. It's like kind of the high end of their, yeah.
how many
They're
feet?
big.
Yeah.
I think it was like it's like 14 to 20, something like that.
Huh.
Yeah, and
That
I could see them exceeding, especially the largest ones in like the Maastrichtian. I think Scapanorhynchus texanus would have been more around that range. And but yeah, they're not the most impressive Scapanorhynchus species, but they're still an impressive animal.
Yeah, I've found Scapanorhynchus texanus teeth that are approaching 2 inches, and I have found one where it's the root and the top of the blade that would have been like at least 2.5 inches. That thing would have been big if it was complete. It's like it dwarfs every other Scapanorhynchus tooth in my collection. And if you just, say it's proportional to the others, it would have been like a 2.5 inch tooth. It's giant. Um, so yeah, they're really interesting in my mind, but they don't, especially with this list and how stacked it is, they don't deserve the top three tiers. I'm gonna put them in
Yeah,
probably.
I was gonna put them
C's
in
good.
B. You think
B,
C?
B or C both make sense. Here, let's think. We can't have
Yeah.
Aquila lamna and Scapanorhynchus considered on the same level. Aquila lamna is so much cooler. I think C. Aquila lamna and Cretolamna being on the same level kind of makes
But
sense.
is Hesperornis really cooler than Scapanorhynchus?
We could knock down Hesperornis.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get
That's
that out.
fair.
So I think Hesperornis can go down to D pretty comfortably.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'd be okay with knocking down Maya Spondylus as well.
yeah. I was afraid to say it
Yeah.
because you sounded very passionate about Ichthyology, but I agree.
I am, but they're in the wrong waters in this one.
Yeah, like come on. All right, so my spondylus
Yeah.
is in D.
This was a marine reptile tier list. I'd be a lot more aggressive in defending Ichthyosaurs, but
So Hesperornis,
they're
I'm
just not
thinking,
Western interior animals. They're a little bit out of place.
yeah, so Hesperornis, I'm thinking D, and you said Myspondylus in D as well.
No, I said C. I don't.
Oh, C.
Yeah, we could just knock it down.
I think that's
Just
fair.
just
What do
clearing
you
out
guys
road
think?
B.
Hmm. Um, I'm not gonna lie. I'd like to see Delinquoricops move down to D as well.
No, not no, no.
I
Come
just
on, they're like whales.
what
They had. You're gonna look at a Dolly Corincops family. You're gonna move them down. You're gonna look at that family
what
full
do
of
they have?
loving.
Or what do they have that other polycotylids don't? Is like the
Oh,
question.
sure. Well, but like there aren't any other polycotylids on this list.
True.
Polycotylus proper was a Western Interior Seaway animal.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
There's only one polycotylid on this list. How many of these sharks do we have on this list?
Fair.
You
Maybe
saying I'm biased?
maybe we should move down this. Maybe you should move down the squid, Euteuthis or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
The thing that used to be called Tusateuthis. I don't
Hmm.
remember now.
Yeah, I guess I could. Yeah, I kind of think so too.
D. Yeah. So
So
Yeah,
sorry.
we're thinking
D.
this on D?
I really here. I really, really, really think that they are interesting, and I really want to find one. That's like top five. No, that's a lie. Top 10 bucket list find for me. But I don't know. There's some interesting animals on here, and I physically cannot get my soul to agree to moving even the boring mosasaurs, Cladastes and Platycarpus. Like I can't agree with you moving them down any further. So
That's fair.
I think Hesperornis could even be an F.
Move Cretalamna down. Come on.
of any of the C's,
You have
Cretalamnum.
two sharks in the S tier.
Fair, fair.
Huh? Yeah.
All right, so we have four animals on the chopping block. The first one is Tusoteuthis. Where are we putting that one?
Um,
I mean, I'm fine with it. Honestly, I'm fine with the F tier. I'm not saying it should. I'm saying I'm fine with it.
I'll live. I'll live. You know what? Like I don't know anything about it, so maybe it's actually way more dull than I'm hyping it up to be. So
I
who knows?
couldn't find really much about them at all, And I
Mhm.
feel like,
That
yeah,
mystery,
I'd say D or F.
that mystery makes them cool. But yeah, let's put them in D.
Yeah.
D for
D.
now.
Okay. And we have Hesperornis on the chopping
That's
block.
fair. Yeah, I mean
See,
F.
I
that's
really
valid.
like them. I really like that they're like, first of all, just the fact that they could survive in that area
Yeah,
is amazing. But they're like bird mosasaurs.
yeah,
And
and
like,
there's nothing else quite like them, right?
Yeah,
yeah, I really like them a lot. I don't know.
big dumb stinky bird, just like Uranus. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you guys won't keep it in B?
Where
For
is
now, yeah.
Uranus? Is it an F? Good, it should be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Honestly, as an act of self-sacrifice, we can bump the Icky before we bump the Hesperornis form.
Okay, so
Hesperornis,
the
excuse me.
next one is Myospondylus. Where is this one going?
I'm gonna see.
Yeah.
C. I think I can do C on that. And then the
No,
last one is Cretalamna.
I think Cartalamna is okay for now. I have a suspicion that
First on the block, though.
yeah, and look, I have a suspicion Cladastes and Platycarpus are going to get moved into D at some point, but they are such iconic Western Interior Seaway fauna that I can't really justify that. I don't know. Because we do have a mosasaur ranked pretty highly, which is how things should
Mhm.
be, you know?
We have a couple
But
of them pretty high.
yeah,
Yeah,
mosasaurs.
the mosasaurs are they're synonymous with Western Interior Seaway. They're like the
Yeah.
the One,
So
Hmm.
our next one is Squalocorax prisodontis. These are commonly referred to as the crow shark, and this is the largest of the Squalocorax species. These were cosmopolitan in distribution. Um, I can't recall ever seeing one in the US being this big, but you can get these teeth far exceeding 2 inches in Morocco, which is
Yeah.
absurd.
That
They're
is
these are kind of like
They're
the
cool teeth too.
they're what?
And they're cool teeth. Like they're
Yeah.
really easily recognizable, at least, a lot, depending on the positioning.
Yes, the interior ones especially, they're very heart-shaped. They're serrated, and this is one of the few lineages of mackerel sharks that when it evolved serrations, it became very successful and moved on for a long period of time. You have these and the most famous one being the megalodon lineage. But when you look at other lamniforms such as like Carcharoides or Alopius with Alopius platyci, Paleocarcharodon, those animals don't live very long after obtaining their serrations geologically. And I guess the modern version of that with the great white, they're not doing too great. And I guess even taking out of account human intervention and what we've done to them, um, they haven't really been around for very long, geologically speaking, the great white. But anyways, these things I kind of think of as like the Cretaceous equivalent to the Carcharinus. They're fantastic generalist animals. And Squalocorax prisodontis, it was a decent sized one too. Most of the Squalocoraxes were they were mid-sized sharks. They were probably um, at around the same trophic level, I would think, as Cretalamna was.
I like to think of them.
They only got to like they were like I think max out at like 10 feet though. They weren't, you know, that big.
Although the some of the Moroccan teeth, those came from probably much bigger animals than that.
Yeah.
Like the 2 inch plus interiors from there. That those
Yeah.
must have come from a massive animal.
I like to think of them as
And
the.
they're also like scavengers, like the way our modern like great whites are. I think they found a tooth embedded in like a hadrosaurid dinosaur that must have like floated out to
Mhm.
sea.
They've very easy to identify feeding damage because they're the only Cretaceous lamniform that had serrations, and serrations leave very unique, easily identifiable feeding wear on bones, and so yeah, you have feeding damage from Squalocorax on all sorts of things.
Mm.
I like to think of them a little bit as Cretaceous tiger sharks because their teeth, like Squalocorax falcatus, is the one that I find the most in Turonian stratus. Their teeth are superficially similar to Galeacerdo, to tiger sharks. They have that. They're serrated. They kind of have that backwards hook with the. I just look at them. Like if you're listening, just look. Tiger shark tooth and Squalocorax tooth. They look close.
I took a picture a while ago of Squalocorax benguarensis, and their teeth are very similar to Galeocerdo mayambensis, where you have the serrations, but they're complex. They have serrations on the serrations, basically.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
so you had a lot of convergence with them. And I would say that Squalocorax prisodontis ecologically, you could probably say is fairly similar to the tiger shark. You did have a at least one other serrated lamniform within the very late Cretaceous, within the Maastrichtian Pseudocorax affinis.
Hmm.
However, they, like most of the other ones I said, they just die off very soon after they evolve those serrations. And what
Interesting.
what is really cool is how you have all these different like lamniform taxa that start evolving serrations but never actually reach it. So like I've seen cardobiodon teeth with serrated lateral heels. I've seen serrations evolve on Scapanorhynchus, like the cusplets are fully serrated. I've seen Cretalamna with serrated cusplets, but those lineages just don't, like it doesn't get passed down, or at least that we know of, and doesn't move into a fully serrated crown.
That's cool. I didn't know any of that, Ben. That's crazy that you get some early serrations on those taxa.
It's
I didn't
really just experimentation.
know.
If those traits wind up working well for the animal, eventually they'll get passed down. And serrations, at least within lamniforms, must be a fairly easy thing for them to evolve,
Very.
considering how many different lineages have evolved them convergently.
Yeah, for real. Well, here, let's look at our list. Let's see what we got. We have room in B tier. I don't
I
think
think
these.
it's a B tier animal.
I think they're C.
Yeah.
Well, B makes sense. I'm okay with B. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the gentleman of the Corax. So,
Yeah.
or the
In
gentry
that
of the
case, S
Corax.
tier.
Yeah. All right. B
Yeah,
tier.
I'd say B.
B.
Yeah.
He's fine.
Our next animal is
No.
Styxosaurus snowi.
Stegosaurus snowy.
Uh, most vertebra of any, like the longest neck in terms of most vertebra of any animal ever.
Longer than Alberta nectes?
More vertebra, less length.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Interesting.
So I think
Well,
70 something.
wow. That's actually nuts. I do like Elasmosaurus as much as the next guy, but if that's all it has going for it, and the fact that there are two
Uh,
Elas,
it's it's got a good fossil record. It's much better than Elasmosaurus. It's got a good fossil record. It's in the Nile chalk proper, so it's coexisting with all these other classic Western interior fauna. It's a distinct and iconic component of this distinct and iconic ecosystem.
gotcha.
I think that this
And
one. Oh, go.
yeah, yeah. If I had my way, this would be an S tier.
I
But like I know that we're getting into some hard choices, and there's another animal that I also want an S tier that's coming up. So
I
See, I
think
think that this one deserves, I guess, the reputation that Elasmosaurus earned.
right,
Yeah.
right. It's a cool name, hell lizard. I mean, like, however what you want to translate Greek river Styx,
yeah,
frequently like, official etymology is hell, but because it was found in Hell Creek, Kansas, which has nothing to do with Hell Creek, South Dakota.
that's so funny.
Um, yeah, to avoid preempt any confusion on that front.
Huh. When you said Hell Creek for a second, I was like, what?
Yeah,
Okay, so I think now that I forgot that there are two Elasmosaurs in here, which makes me instantly want to move Elasmosaurus proper into D tier and
sure.
place it with Styxosaurus.
Would you be comfortable with Styxosaurus being in C?
Well, it might deserve higher.
Uh, I think it deserves at least the top half of the list.
It needs to, honestly, Ben, let's be real here. Hesperornis, I was gonna say Corax, but it should replace Hesperornis. I think
We
Hesperornis.
should bump Cretalamna down one. Like it's got nothing going for it, honestly. We've got all these sharks, and it's the most boring one here.
Damn.
I mean,
Except it's Megalodon one day. That's kind of cool. Okay, I agree. We'll do. How about this?
I guess I'll concede on Cretalamna.
Cretalamna in D, and then Styxosaurus in B, and we'll move Hesperornis into C to make
That's
that happen.
fine. Again, I think I'm going to voice this. I think Styxosaurus should go in S, but I understand that Hell's Aquarium is getting very hot right now. So
So everyone agrees with Cretalamna in D, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
And then Hesperornis in C.
To make room, yeah, I agree. I think it's objectively cooler than Hesperornis, and should take its place in B tier.
Okay.
I can't believe
Some hard choices in this one.
Yeah.
we're saying Deinonychus is as cool as Styxosaurus. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit of a hater right now about Deinonychus. It should be a little low.
I'm using Dolichoryncops as polycotylid emblem. So I'm just placing where I think polycotylid should go, not just Dolichoryncops.
I understand.
This is going to get very tough.
We have just a big like
Yeah.
clam in S. So fun.
Yeah.
So it's big.
That's the
We
Maverick
like
choice.
it. I'm
Our
proud of
next
us
one's-
for making that decision.
Our next one is Tylosaurus proriger.
Okay.
Take
We-
it away, Jared.
What?
we both
Take it
have
away, Jared.
okay. Tylosaurus prorigor. I personally like way more than Mosasaurus hoffmanni because I'm currently digging one up.
You're
So
here.
I like it. And it is an impressive animal, more than 40 feet. There's a specimen nicknamed Bunker in Kansas that's, I think, 45 feet. Um,
He's yeah, he's like touching 50, I think, like 48,
really?
49, something like
Wow.
that.
Impressive.
Do not. I'm not a Mosasaur guy. Do not quote me on that.
No, it's like you know your stuff though so far. So I bet you're probably right. And yeah, no, Tylosaurus is really cool. And taxonomically, it is a little interesting. There is some work being done on ProRigor right now, and I'm not going to say anything about it, just because it's not my place. But we're going to have some. There's going to be some shifting the papers regarding this taxon in the not far future. The holotype comes from Kansas. If I remember correctly, it's I don't know what age the holotype is. I'm gonna guess Santonian. I'm not sure. Could be
Oh, and
Campanian.
I was wrong about that, by the way. It's 45. You were correct.
Oh, let's go. Cool. So anyway, they have a pretty wide distribution. You get them in Texas, per the literature. You get them in Kansas. You get them further north as well. Anywhere you have good Campanian strata, they seem to show up. You get other species of Tylosaurus as you move on from the early Campanian. But overall, Tylosaurus proeger, I think, is the biggest. It's solid choice. I think it contends with Mosasaurus hoffmanni. It doesn't have the same amount of lore, but it was one of the
It's not
early.
as robust.
Huh?
It's not as robust.
Yeah, and it's more plesiomorphic. So, like, Mosasaurus
Yeah.
hoffmanni has a lot of derived characters, whereas as a whole, Tylosaurines, especially Tylosaurus, is somewhat primitive. For
Okay.
most at
It's
this time.
pointier though. I think it's more aesthetic. Honestly, Amelia Zietlo's done a lot to sell me on Tylosaurus itself. So I'm like I've decided that this is the dog I'm going to back in the Mosasaur wars. So
You know
uh,
what? Amelia Zietlow is working on Tylosaurus, so she has the full right to think that it is as cool as
yeah.
it is. Right now, I'm working on early Tylosaurians, so or not working on them, but I'm reading a lot about them. Just that I'm well, what you have is there's this new taxon that I'm helping write up, and it's an early Russellosaurin. And so you have to read about the early Platycarpians, the early Tylosaurians, and I just think Tylosaurus is cool. It has this mysterious origin, and yeah, it's a cool animal. I really think Tylosaurus can at least be in the same tier as Hoffmanni, but to have two large apex mosasaurs in the same tier, I think one of them will have to go because they'll be competing.
This is an S tier animal. I think I prefer pliosaurs to mosasaurs. I think the megacephalosaurus needs to get bumped down to A tier. This thing should take its spot.
I would bump Globidens down before I bump Megacephalosaurus.
That's fair. I mean, sure.
Um, let me think. Let me think. Globidens belongs where it is.
I like Lobodons too. I think it belongs where it is.
Yeah.
I'd fight for that.
I'm willing to put Megalocephalosaurus in. Dude, okay, pause. We really need to think hard about having this giant clam in that tier.
I stand by the giant clam and S.
It's
Okay,
hey,
Great.
this is our insurance policy against people telling us that we're biased towards giant, cool,
Exactly.
Yeah,
extinct
we need
sharks and
one.
reptiles.
We had the
Yeah.
giant tube worm.
What are you talking about? We put the giant, stupid clam in S tier.
Yeah.
true.
I mean, the
Okay,
thing was
here's
like a house, though. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
come on. It
Yeah.
helped others. We like it.
You know, I will go against my chondrichthyan bias and be willing to move Tychotus down for
I agree.
Tylosaurus.
I agree, but then we have
Yeah.
to make room in A tier. Um,
We can kick out
Pterosaur
the
down to
ammonite.
C.
what's down to C?
Pterosaur.
Yeah,
No, if you move Pteranodon another spot down, I am walking out of this podcast right now.
uh, Ben, I'm glad we're haters about the same thing. Let me think. How about
We
this?
love the ammonite.
We love the ammonite. We love the ammonite. We okay.
Again, it's big.
Let's move the weird demon swordfish down.
What?
It's cool, but like
It's cool.
I'd be fine with moving that also.
How about this?
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's compromise. I like Protospirena, but I've been a Deinonychus hater. So what if we put Protostyrena in the Deinonychus spot, and then we take Deinonychus and put it in C tier?
So no one wins. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Is everyone else fine with that?
I think
You're
it's a creative
you're
solution.
gonna look at a beautiful family of Dolichoryntops, tender mother and child bonds. You're gonna look at that and go, C tier.
Yes.
Yeah, but you're gonna be judging an animal based on its family, not based on it itself.
Yeah, get owned. All right, I'm gonna say C tier.
Okay. My what's the word? My arguments are noted. Move it down.
Let's
Okay,
go.
so we have that in C. Protosphorina is going to be, and we said I would move Tychotus
Nature's got
in
three of
A,
these stupid sharks in it.
Tychotus is an A. Protostyrena is an S.
and then Tylosaurus in S.
Sorry, yeah, Tylosaurus and S. Protostyrena is
That
one.
brings us to our last one, which I also feel like should be an S tier animal.
Yeah,
I
straight up,
love
yeah.
these fish. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so happy
Yeah.
you said that.
Yeah,
Xifac.
no, Zivactinus. I don't even like Zivactinus, but
Dude,
that's just an S tier animal.
I have so many things to say about Xiphactinus. First, one,
Oh, yeah.
I was present for the discovery of a big Xiphactinus, so that automatically makes me biased. Two, uh, you have two species of Xiphactinus, right? Xiphactinus as a genus ranges from the Albion to the Maastrichtian. Now, the two species are Xiphactinus audax and this thing called Xiphactinus vitus, which is pretty what's the word? I'm having brain fart. It's just like little bits and pieces of it. There's not that much that exists of it. The main thing that separates it from audax is it has carinae on its teeth. So its teeth have cutting edges. Xiphactinus audax has no cutting edges on its teeth. That's it. And let's be real. Xiphactinus vitus is known from New Jersey. I think it's Maastrichtian, if I remember correctly. Maybe it's Campanian, but I think it's Maastrichtian. So that means that Xiphactinus audax has a range from the Albion to the Maastrichtian. You also find it Maastrichtian.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts.
That is an insane temporal range. That's like 30 million years that one species has existed. So is it a waste bucket? Maybe, but I've never seen it suggested that it is. Like all these specimens look basically the same. This thing, what it's known for is swallowing fish that are so big its stomach explodes and then it dies. There's a Xiphactinus specimen in Kansas called the fish within a fish specimen. It has a thriptotus inside its gut that's like 6 feet long. And this is a, I don't know, 15, 16 foot Xiphactinus that has it. For those of you
I thought it was a I'm pretty sure it's a Gillicus.
oh, there's also
Yeah,
one
this
okay,
Yeah. There's
the
like
one
four
in
or five of
Hayes,
those.
the
No, the
fish
one in
within the fish
Kansas.
fossil. Yeah, it's a Gillicus.
Yeah.
okay. Well,
My other Fort Hayes shirt has that on it, and I chose the Tyrannosaurus
Oh,
today because
that's awesome.
well, here's the
yeah.
thing then. What makes this extra metal? Yeah, you're right. It's probably a Gillicus. There is also, without a doubt, that I'm positive of because I read about it the other day, a Xiphactinus that has a thriptotus inside of it, like the same scenario as the
Probably, yeah.
fish.
There's
Yeah.
like six of those like Ziphackins that ate a meal too big then exploded. Like there's one in the
Yeah.
Smithsonian.
Dude, these are like the NBA young boy fans of the fish world. Like they're so metal, they
I don't know what that means.
whoever. Like they're just they like if these things had music to just be around them, it's just like hardcore rap the whole time. They're out to get you.
I'm hearing Pantera for them.
Like
Yeah, I
Like
wasn't
some
thinking
Tough Boy
hardcore
music.
rap, but okay.
I don't know.
I'm not. I don't know their
I
preferences.
do like the idea of a bunch of Ziphackins just like cruising around, like playing Chief Keef and just eating Hesperornis just left and
Yes,
right.
for real. That's literally what he'd be doing. And
I
hey,
dig
those
that.
of you who don't know Actinus, you probably saw it in Prehistoric Planet. It's those big toothy things. And if you didn't see Prehistoric Planet, imagine a 17-foot long tarpon with huge teeth. That's it.
Yeah.
Like
And didn't they get even
And-
larger? Some of the largest ones?
I think 17 feet is about the max, but they might get larger. I don't know.
They got bigger. I thought they can get up to like 20, but yeah,
Dude,
Yeah.
who knows?
That's crazy. Maybe.
I
Yeah.
thought it was over
The
20.
fish within a fish feels like it's 20.
Yeah.
Like just looking at it.
Yeah, I
Because
know.
I
I
worked
know
in the
they can at
Sunbird. I
least
saw
get
it
up
every
to
day.
20.
Okay. Wow. I didn't know
God,
that.
that's awesome.
Dude, S tier, you can't argue with me about this.
Yep,
There's no way
S.
it can't be S tier.
It's one of
Right.
the longest lived
S.
species of all time.
Okay, will you drop Megacephalosaurus for
Yes.
Ziphacktinus?
Yes.
That's such a tough
Okay.
one.
Oh, but what are we gonna put in F though?
Oh, crap. Okay, let's think.
How
We
about
got
Encodus?
baculitis. What the hell is
How about
baculitis?
Baculitis? Yeah, how about Baculitis?
Yeah, I guess.
Baculites in F.
Yeah, sorry, baculitis. And then in D, I think we should put Dinicaricus. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay, I'm gonna fall on my sword here. Put the Ichthyosaur.
The
Really?
Ichthyosaur in D.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yep.
that it doesn't belong. It's in strange waters. A little out of
Scapanorhynchus.
time, a little out of place.
So what's
Scapanorhynchus
going in
and
C?
Corax should both be in C. Low key. Which one do we like least? Squat.
Move one of the freaking sharks. Oh my god.
Oh my God, stop hurting us sharks.
Let's put
I
squat.
do think Squalocorax
Yeah,
could be a C tier animal because it
it's.
is one of the most average sharks in the Cretaceous.
I agree.
Hmm.
So then
I'm actually cool with Archelon getting moved.
To be,
Yeah,
I would move Pteranodon before
I
Archelon.
would too.
I know you would.
Dude, Pteranodon is
Mm.
not in the
I,
ocean.
I, I can't threaten to walk out at this point because we're at the end of the list, so it doesn't actually that threat doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But
Pteranodon doesn't swim. Let
Well,
me remind you.
so
I
Meaghan is
literally
the
moved the
deciding
Ichthyosaur.
opinion
I
on
moved
it.
the Ichthyosaur. What else do you want from me? What else do you want me to compromise on?
Okay, how about this? I am
I'm
okay with maybe moving Tychodus. Like, I
I
know
would
I'm
be
I'm
the
not.
turtle.
I'm not okay with it. I'm not. I will fight. I will
How
leave.
about Archelon? Why not Archelon?
I'm
Why not
fine with the
Archelon?
turtle too.
Archelon is.
Fine.
It's cool. It's still in the top third of the list.
I'll be okay. Fine. I'm okay with being
And
outvoted.
it's an
My
animal that has
CODIS can't get
modern
moved yet.
relatives that tells us exactly what it would have looked like. So like it doesn't even have a business being as high as it is.
This is devastating.
And
Wow.
then what's going to A tier?
Um,
For
let me think.
I'm
Megas,
thinking I'm thinking Globidens.
dude. If you move,
I.
okay.
It's
To be fair,
poetic. The two crusher animals, the two Durophagous ones in A.
there are two mosasaurs in S tier, and I think for distribution, one of them should probably get moved. And I'm gonna say Tylosaurus.
no, wait. That's not where I thought that was going.
I would agree with
Dude, the
Cole.
Lord of the
What's her
Western,
name?
the King of the Western Interior Seaway, the most iconic animal from it, besides maybe Pteranodon. Uh, I goes in S tier, I think. This
This
okay. We can move the clam. We can move the clam.
The clam is saying where the clam is.
Cam needs to
Okay.
stay. I think
We
just on
could we could
principle
move
alone.
Megacephalosaurus.
I agree. Megacephalosaurus freaking died so fast.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's like the
Yeah,
history of its
that's
existence in the
true.
Western Interior is it going extinct and taking down its entire lineage with it.
yes, the mosasaur.
That's not very S tier behavior to me.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess
I
I'll
can agree
concede
with
on
that.
Megacephalosaurus going down to A. So
Yeah,
I'm
you've been
Okay.
outvoted. And
Okay.
then
This
that leaves Zephactinus in her S. I think that's a pretty decent S lineup, and I think this was a stacked
yeah.
list.
This was
Yeah.
a. That's so fun. That's awesome. This was so cool.
Yeah. And for those that want to
So
see some
yes.
of these taxa like Zephactinus, Tylosaurus, Mosasaurus, we did have an episode done before Marine March Madness. Jared, you were on that one.
Hmm.
That one we pitted Tylosaurus and Mosasaurus on, so I would recommend the audience to check that one out. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining, Gentlemen of the Corax. This is our Western Interior Seaway tier list.
Dove.
Yeah,
Yeah.
please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff that can help support the channel. And yeah, if you have another idea for a tier list, let us know.
Comment. Yeah. I mean, like, even if it's just to say mean things to me, comment, engage.
Yeah, no, I want to be actually. I want to be roasted about something. I need
They're
it.
gonna roast us on the clam.